Imagine watching helplessly as the only woman you ever loved is ripped away. She screamed your name, pleading for salvation, yet you were utterly powerless to intervene. Frozen in absolute despair, a pathetic weakling entirely drained of bravery and might, an almighty sorcerer declared those struggles meaningless. In this cruel realm, absolute dominance dictates fate, an inescapable truth even that grand wizard barely comprehended. Thus, she vanished into the abyss. Truly, overwhelming strength reigns supreme above all. That traumatic devastation shattered Aruda's soul, forcing him down a relentless path of obsession for supreme strength. Over 60 agonizing years faded away. Exhausting every forbidden art, he boldly challenged the deadliest labyrinth known to humanity for its ultimate artifact. Yet, death claimed him before victory. Tragic lifetime wasted chasing absolute supremacy. Awakening from his fatal demise, he faced the Almighty. Holding the legendary divine tear granted him this celestial audience. The Supreme Being presented a fateful ultimatum: embrace eternal peace, or endure 2 decades of agonizing mortal trials once more. To alter destiny and rescue his beloved, he boldly chooses regression. Thus, our main character secures his legendary second chance. His consciousness plunges back to the exact moment of his birth, gazing upon the faces of his long-lost family, his stunningly beautiful mother and fiercely protective father, alive once again. Burning with fierce determination, he vowed never to squander another breath. His epic journey of rapid growth had to begin immediately. However, his infant vessel remained helplessly immobile. Suddenly, a miraculous holographic system window manifested before his eyes, revealing combat stats and skills he never originally possessed. Though barely 4 weeks into this world, this prodigy babbled relentlessly, fully believing he was articulating grand strategies. Then, a crucial memory surfaced: the deity's final blessing. The Creator had explained the innate cosmic talents bestowed upon every mortal soul. Among them existed the blessing of supreme intelligence, the blessing of absolute martial mastery, the blessing of devastatingly overpowered sorcery, or the blessing of unyielding charm. Others wielded unparalleled technological mastery, but the rarest of all was the legendary power of creation. Aruda originally commanded the talent of wisdom. When the Almighty offered a repeat of destiny, our main character rejected it, demanding the mysterious power of creation instead. Despite absorbing immense knowledge across 60 years, our hero never encountered this mythical creation talent the divine entity spoke of. Naturally, his ambition seized that unknown potential. Awaking now, he stared at a magical status screen entirely alien to this era. This digital phenomenon was undoubtedly tethered to his unprecedented cosmic blessing. While rescuing his fated lover remained his ultimate goal, a darker tragedy haunted his soul. His parents were brutally slaughtered when he turned 8, a memory clouded by decades of grief. On the tragic evening of his 8th birthday, a monstrous goblin horde violently besieged their peaceful settlement. Searing agony still pierced his heart, recalling his father's final, desperate stand to buy his fragile family time to flee. As the monsters overwhelmed them, his weeping mother hurled him into the dark woods, screaming for him to survive. Left with 0 options, he fled like a coward. Given the profoundly savage and vile nature of goblin kind, the unspeakable horrors inflicted upon her were a nightmare he carried forever. The time for weeping has officially ended. Armed with future knowledge, his glorious regression will rewrite this bloody history. Step 1 demanded aggressive leveling of his intelligence and spiritual parameters. He devoured ancient texts so intensely it genuinely terrified his doting mother. He mastered his rigorous mana manipulation, training as playful games with his father. While toddlers played in the mud, this reborn legend mastered intense acrobatic maneuvers. Leaving ordinary infants utterly speechless, his agility parameters skyrocketed, unlocking advanced evasive techniques at record speeds. This flawless grinding routine escalated with every newly awakened power. 8 rigorous years vanished in the blink of an eye. Meditating beneath a towering oak, Arudo constantly refined his divine creation talent. Breaking his intense focus, his beaming mother approached to celebrate his 8th milestone. Radiating pure maternal affection, she trapped him in a bear hug so fierce it nearly depleted his hard-earned vitality points. His proud father loudly claimed credit for the boy's sharp features, excitedly announcing the start of his formal combat training, earning a rare nod of approval from his wife. Showering him with even more birthday affection, she reminded him about his crucial evening appointment at the holy sanctuary. It was absolute tradition for 8-year-olds to claim their magical identification crests. These mystical artifacts functioned as citizenship badges across the realm, and today marked his official integration into magical society. The sanctuary's holy cleric commanded him to extend his arms. Obeying smoothly, he felt the cool metal of the enchanted verification artifact latch onto his skin. This enchanted seal will grant you passage into the grand capital, the wise elder warned, urging absolute caution. Feeling the artifact's hum, a dark shadow fell over our hero's brilliant eyes. The countdown had begun. That savage goblin vanguard would strike this peaceful haven in mere hours. Hot tears of rage threatened to fall, but he violently suppressed his trauma. The fateful hour was approaching. Channeling the bitter regrets of his previous incarnation, he swore upon his soul to annihilate the looming threat. Dashing out of the holy grounds and vanishing into the dense tree line, he immediately summoned his glowing holographic interface, meticulously analyzing his combat potential. Calculating the odds, he realized breaking past level 15 was absolutely mandatory to trigger a devastating leap in raw physical dominance. Yet, his mana resonated at level 32, unleashing absolute mastery over every technique honed across 8 grueling years. Only one enigmatic power eluded Arudo's grasp: the divine art of forging practical items. He finally understood his past failure. This dormant creation skill had never truly belonged to him. Deeming it harmless for combat, he ignited the ability. Instantly, a chilling realization hit him. The goblin vanguard had already breached the woods. Diving behind a massive trunk, he locked eyes on 3 foul goblin scouts prowling near. Arudo forced his racing heart to steady. He had slaughtered countless beasts in his past. Spotting his shadow, the screeching monsters lunged. This marked the absolute first blood of his regressed life, the perfect stage to unleash his hellish training. Channeling his blazing aura, Aruto channeled every agonizing day of practice, swearing to rewrite fate. Carrying the village's survival on his shoulders, he unleashed a devastating torrent of roaring flames. Incinerating the first beast sparked a fleeting triumph, but danger loomed. Mid-strike against the second, a deadly ambush erupted from his blind spot. He narrowly dodged, knowing fatal errors were unacceptable. Standing over 3 slaughtered scouts, Arudo realized his firepower was lacking. Surviving this encounter was purely luck against such weak beasts. The monsters crumbled. A golden system screen announced his level up. Pure, intoxicating satisfaction flooded his very veins. Victory brought instant growth. The sudden surge of raw energy left him dizzy, utterly intoxicated by this newfound power. Suddenly, a rogue goblin lunged with a rusted blade. Before he could react, cold steel violently sliced his arm. A second wave already, he cursed inwardly. Slaying his immediate attacker, he spun around only to face an endless, bloodthirsty sea of monsters. Bleeding and utterly ambushed, facing this overwhelming monstrous legion felt like an absolute, crushing death sentence. Suffocating despair choked him. Was destiny truly inescapable? No matter how fiercely he fought, his cursed fate remained completely unchanged. His beloved's face flashed within his fading mind. Instantly, an unyielding, blazing resolve shattered his dark despair. He refused to die here. Fueled by desperate regret, his mana violently exploded to level 50, awakening a legendary new skill, Grave Reaper. Gazing at the golden holographic system window confirming his explosive growth, he finally grasped the mysterious crafting art. This divine ability would only unleash its true terrifying potential at higher realms. So that was my barrier, he realized. Suddenly, a massive, screeching horde of monsters converged right behind him. Did these foul beasts smell his bleeding wounds rather than fear his aura? As they swarmed, a deadly destiny loomed over him. The screeching beast suddenly lunged. Barely dodging the lethal blade by a hair's breadth, he countered by erupting a devastating sphere of roaring flames. He fiercely struck back, but his bleeding arm crippled his speed as the monstrous wave violently multiplied. Suddenly, an elite squad of 8 beasts charged simultaneously. Refusing to fall, he anchored his unwavering faith in his newly awakened, overwhelming absolute power. Activating Grave Reaper, his overwhelming magic violently hurled the screaming monsters down into the dark abyss. Had he actually survived? The grave crafting power was absolute. Staring at his trembling hands, overwhelming joy and blazing hope surged. He had shattered his tragic destiny and saved everyone. Instantly, the glowing system panel announced a massive, explosive-level surge. Reaping the horde brought immense growth. However, ancient legends warned that breaking mortal limits and advancing classes always triggered excruciating, soul-tearing agony. Pain erupted, instantly stealing his consciousness. Slowly, he fluttered his heavy eyes open. A freezing chill gripped him, something soft brushing his cheek. His vision focused on a tiny, mysterious beast bounding away in panic. What was this strange anomaly? A breathtakingly radiant slime nervously peeked out at him. It offered a shimmering liquid. Risking it all, he consumed the magical essence, instantly feeling a miraculous, soothing surge of restorative healing energy. Bouncing playfully around him, the magical entity completely captivated his gaze. What was it? Studying its gentle aura, he realized this wasn't some bloodthirsty beast, but a remarkably affectionate companion. Suddenly, the blob pounced right onto his face. Its mysterious motives eluded him, but its squishy embrace tickled beyond absolute belief. Soon, he stood upon the highest peak, staring down at his serene, nature-bound birthplace, the very sanctuary he had just bled to protect. The little creature gestured toward the peaceful homes, but he firmly refused to regress. Destiny demanded he save his beloved, yet his power was pitifully lacking. Was it futile? No. Just a mile away awaited a legendary, labyrinthine underground domain. Singular obsession was slaughtering through its upper floors, desperately devouring every ounce of experience. Visions of his cherished love fueled his hunger for power. He pictured the massive dungeon city's imposing gates and the brutal trials ahead. He had exactly 7 years to defy that apocalyptic, fated day. With the slimy creature enveloping him, Aruto offered a silent, heart-wrenching apology to his parents for vanishing. He left behind a final note detailing his fateful mission. Though he felt his demise approaching, absolute duty demanded he set things right. Unending gratitude filled his soul for their infinite affection. Cherishing 8 glorious years of childhood memories, he felt genuinely blessed to have been raised by such loving parents. Hot tears blurred his vision as the fateful departure arrived. Yet, stepping out into the unknown, the mysterious slime trailed close behind. Sensing a potential threat from its unblinking stare, our hero firmly declared that his perilous journey must be walked alone. The defenseless creature could never survive ravenous beasts. Miraculously, the tiny blob sprouted limbs and offered an enthusiastic round of applause. Touched by her desperate concern, he relented, allowing her companionship. Together, man and monster stepped into their shared destiny. 30 days later, a brutal clash with a fierce wolf left him starving. Beside him, his squishy companion hauled a mysterious prize. Noting the fresh slashes on the beast, he praised his little ally. She responded by dropping a glowing mana crystal into his pouch. These radiant gems guaranteed absolute financial freedom. The loyal creature carefully deposited her glittering treasure. Bounding ahead with eager squeaks, the creature led the way. Could this tiny beast have actually scouted a safe haven? Peeking around a massive rocky cliff, he gasped. Right beside his triumphant gelatinous friend sat the yawning maw of a cave. Absolute sanctuary to recover strength before tomorrow's march toward Kennedagris. Grilling savory meat, he smirked. Foraging for food among weak monsters felt like absolute child's play for a seasoned veteran like him. His physical vessel rapidly evolved, echoing the unrivaled, dominant power of his glorious past life. Instantly, a glowing status screen flashed before his eyes. Level 32. His base stats were surging with terrifying momentum. To achieve ultimate supremacy, plunging into a deadly dungeon would guarantee maximum experience gains. Resting on a boulder with his meal, he glanced down. His adorable gelatinous partner had scaled his shoulder, happily devouring roasted meat alongside him. He tossed a handful of grains, curious if its bottomless appetite possessed any limits. A warm grin broke across his face. Anticipating a mountain of harvested mana cores, he felt incredibly blessed by this fated encounter. He questioned if this cute blob was secretly a ruthless apex predator, a thought that sent a sudden jolt through his mind. Suddenly, chilling bloodlust emanated from the shadows. Acting on pure instinct, our hero launched a blazing skewer straight at the hidden stalker. Lightning-fast blur evaded his strike. Before he could even blink, blinding speed overwhelmed his senses, culminating in a devastating physical blow. One more combo at that godly velocity would instantly shatter his bones into dust. His gaze locked onto an inhuman threat. This demonic presence was undoubtedly a ruthless scavenger hunting for his precious crystals. A terrifying shadow crashed down. Snatching his food, the dust cleared to reveal a striking beastkin warrior girl standing defiantly in his path. He froze completely, entirely paralyzed by sheer shock. Witnessing her savagely inhale his meal, he questioned her humanity. Proclaiming herself a wandering spellcaster, the fierce demi-human immediately demanded his name. Revealing his name, his internal instincts whispered that this stranger held no true malice. Her vibrant eyes sparked with warmth. Mesmerized, he complimented her adorable animal traits. Puffed with pride, she declared her noble squirrelkin heritage. She tested his worldly knowledge, only to arrogantly wave off his answer before he could speak. Staring in absolute confusion, he blinked. In a flash, she teleported directly beside his roaring campfire, eyeing the sizzling meat hungrily. Without hesitation, she boldly claimed the final piece for herself. Completely baffled by her ghostly speed and supreme audacity, he noted her utter lack of basic manners. His loyal slime desperately wrestled for the stolen snack. Dawn broke, revealing the stubborn beast girl tailing his every footstep with the slime resting atop her. Questioning her motives, she scoffed. Claiming he needed a guardian to reach the theater, she vowed to stick by his side permanently. Irritated, our protagonist fired back, questioning her own painfully obvious immaturity. She argued that physical maturity masks youthful ignorance. Infuriated, he proclaimed his absolute independence, swearing his lone wolf journey proved his undeniable manhood. An epiphany struck his mind. Pivoting toward the spellcaster, he proposed a rapid departure to accelerate their tedious trek. A confident smirk sealed their pact. Moments later, his finger pierced the horizon, triumphantly signaling their legendary destination, Kennedagris. A sprawling urban fortress emerged, guarded by impossibly colossal stone battlements. Reaching the imposing gates, an enthusiastic local intercepted them, boasting of peaceful streets and untaxed wealth to lure them inside. For countless eras, This chaotic metropolis housed a dizzying melting pot of mythical races. An abyssal dungeon anchored its core, radiating an intoxicating aura that lured thrill-seekers worldwide. Plunging into its bustling heart, raw terror painted his companion's face. Aruto noticed her trembling gaze. She quietly confessed that this crushing sea of humanity was completely new to her. Turning toward Magika, Aruto revealed his humble village roots. In response, she coldly stated the unforgiving streets were her home. He admitted this sprawling maze terrified him initially. Startled, Magika narrowed her eyes, reminding him he previously claimed he had never visited. Aruto clarified he explored these streets with his parents at age 10. He vividly recalled how the grand city breathed with life. The landscape remained completely untouched by time. Scanning the horizon, Aruto wondered if destiny would drastically shift over the next 2 years. Absolute caution was vital. Breaking his silence, Magika demanded his destination. He declared they must hit the Adventurers Guild for survival funds. He extended an invitation, and she accepted without a single moment of hesitation. Inside the bustling guild, Aruto boldly demanded to trade magic stones. The receptionist scoffed, harshly telling the boy he had wandered into the wrong territory. Aruto blinked in pure shock as the man waved him off, declaring this blood-stained hall was no playground for kids. In response, Aruto slammed his bag down, unleashing a massive avalanche of glowing magic stones. The arrogant clerk's jaw dropped in absolute horror. He stammered, demanding to know how a mere child claimed such a massive hoard. Aruto casually stated he slaughtered monsters to harvest them. A defeated companion here is clueless about the trade, Aruto declared, gesturing toward Magika. The clerk shifted his bewildered gaze toward her. She fiercely opened her mouth to argue, but Aruto instantly silenced her with a sharp, commanding glare. Smirking, Aruto estimated roughly 1,990 units. The trembling clerk confirmed the massive payout: 2 gold, 29 silver, and 85 copper. Fearing that fortune had drained every last drop of his energy, he questioned if this severe fatigue stemmed from his fragile youth or his terrifyingly rapid evolution. Pocketing the heavy coins, Aruto demanded to register as a finder. The bewildered clerk questioned why a weak-looking child craved an adventurer's bloody life. Pointing at Magika, Aruto used her adult status as a shield, declaring a massive upcoming quest required his official registration. Magika furiously attempted to interrupt, but Aruto swiftly covered her mouth, pressured the clerk to rush the paperwork. Stepping outside, Magika grabbed his shoulder, boldly demanding he take her along and exploit her skills. Startled, Aruto blinked and quickly apologized. He admitted his young mind struggled with complex negotiations, so he simply begged for her continued guidance. He questioned if farming magic stones was their best move. She scoffed, warning that mere grinding would never forge a legendary reputation. Shadowing his steps, Magika listened in shock as he violently dismissed fame. True power, he proclaimed, wasn't born from shallow public glory. Magika stared at the boy, utterly stunned by his wisdom. Marching forward, Aruto declared their newly acquired wealth meant securing a decent inn immediately. He offered a feast as a reward, yet gave her the freedom to walk away. Intrigued, Magika accepted his offer, but established one strict condition. She demanded either cold cash or shared quarters. Unfazed by her bold ultimatum, Aruto calmly commanded her to follow. What a dangerously unpredictable woman, Aruto chuckled internally. Under the twilight sky, he warmly confessed his joy at her presence, having expected absolute rejection. In their quiet room, deep conversation began. Aruto revealed his ragged disguise constantly ruined opportunities, even blocking him from tasting this inn's famously exquisite meals. Hoped she would savor the feast. As he spoke passionately, Magika's piercing gaze locked onto him, leaving Aruto confused by her intense scrutiny. Magika casually brushed off his silent confusion. She abruptly announced a bath. As her cloak slipped off, a panicked Aruto frantically begged her to strip behind the bathroom's closed doors. Meanwhile, the exhausted little slime joyfully collapsed onto the soft mattress. Standing in the steamy bathroom, Magika prepared her garments, reflecting on how utterly bizarre this peaceful life felt. Emerging from the steam, she resolved to crash immediately, saving her ravenous appetite for tomorrow's grand breakfast. Suddenly, a suffocating aura hit her. Aruto was channeling magic, unleashing terrifying waves of mana impossible for any normal human. Staring at his meditating form, Magika questioned his true identity. She had crossed continents, desperately hunting for one legendary soul. Yet, as if guided by fate, this enigmatic boy simply materialized beside her. Beneath his youthful shell lay monstrous power and unfathomable arts. She swore to stick close and unravel his dark mysteries. He was hiding something terrifying. Recalling his bizarrely mature philosophy and calculated words, shivers ran down her spine. Could this child truly be the destined savior capable of shattering the world's fate? Ancient prophecies declared the savior would manifest in a female vessel, meaning Aruto could never claim that legendary destiny. Yet, watching him intently, Magika sensed a powerful, familiar fate. This boy possessed the overwhelming power to shatter reality. Within seconds, the boy fell into a deep slumber, completely drained by his brutal physical limits. Studying his motionless form, Magika realized his life force was completely spent, leaving him totally empty. Why torture his body this relentlessly? Dark dread gripped her heart, as if unseen shadows were constantly hunting him down. Above them, sinister eyes pierced the darkness. Suddenly, a phantom figure slipped silently toward their exposed bedroom window. Startled, Magika narrowed her eyes, doubting this shadowy figure was a mere petty burglar. The assassin concealed his aura perfectly, masking his true threat. She could easily obliterate him, but chose to test her companion instead. In slumber, she watched the lethal shadow creep inside, reaching a deadly hand toward the boy. Sensing the killing intent, Aruto awakened with terrifying calmness to mock his assailant. Furious, the attacker lunged forward with a venomous blade. Panic shattered the silence. Magika threw off her blankets, screaming a desperate warning to her friend. Cold steel halted just millimeters from his jugular. The assassin hissed a brutal command, promising survival only if the boy surrendered. Both heroes glared at the hostile intruder, demanding his true objective. Was this cheap ambush truly about stealing mere coins? Who leaked our secure location? Aruto interrogated with icy precision, freezing the startled criminal in absolute silence. Abandoning words, Aruto unleashed hell. A devastating blast of pressurized wind violently launched the crushed assassin backward into the night sky. Trembling slightly, Magika locked eyes with him, frantically checking for any fatal wounds. Brushing it off flawlessly, he claimed total victory. Staring into the abyss, Magika recognized the monstrously advanced magic woven into his casual strike. Such overwhelming destruction was purely lethal. What godlike torment did this child endure to wield such mastery? Seeking answers, she turned, only to find him plunged completely back into dreams. This enigmatic warrior was bound for absolute legendary greatness. Glancing down, she spotted the assassin's abandoned, gleaming blade resting upon the floorboards. Once morning broke, they descended into the bustling hall, eager to devour a massive, well-deserved feast. While mountains of savory plates arrived, the boy gently asked his ravenous companion if the glorious banquet met her high expectations. Cheeks stuffed completely full, Magika joyfully mumbled her overwhelming praise, calling the divine flavors an absolute masterpiece. Chuckling softly, he urged her to breathe between bites. Finishing their massive meal, they stepped outside while she happily patted her stuffed stomach. Smirking playfully, he mocked that her monstrous appetite could easily feed 10 grown men by sunrise. Curiosity sparkling, she eagerly questioned what dangerous quest awaited them next. Their initial dungeon raid was officially cancelled, he confessed. Last night's treacherous ambush violently altered their current trajectory. Gripping the assassin's blade, a dark plan formed. Striding boldly into the guild, he locked eyes with the tense crowd. Two shadowy figures glared fiercely. The wealthy dealer from their previous crystal exchange smirked, recognizing the formidable prodigy from yesterday's massive transaction. Meeting his gaze, the boy unleashed a chilling question about evaluating fresh mystical gems today. The nervous merchant brushed him off, claiming absolute priority with the guild master. Smiling darkly, Aruto countered that such perfect alignment was an absolute blessing. Demanding an immediate audience, he dropped a bombshell. Was a traitor hiding among their ranks? The imposing commander scowled, demanding this arrogant rookie provide hard evidence for such explosive accusations. Unfazed, the boy revealed the terrifying details of last night's brutal, shadow-cloaked assassination attempt inside their private quarters. Though they violently repelled the attack, the Phantom's objective was undeniably the massive fortune earned from their crystal sale. This was no random burglary. The attacker possessed absolute insider knowledge, diving straight for the hidden pouch with terrifying, calculated precision. Therefore, he coldly deduced, the vile mastermind must be someone who witnessed their classified transaction. Delivering this lethal logic, he stared down the leadership. The commander acknowledged the terrifying truth. Whirling toward the shifty-eyed lion across the table, the furious boss demanded answers. Had his trusted subordinate spotted any treacherous activity? Sweating bullets, Lion nervously stuttered pure ignorance, dodging the question entirely. Furious, the commander commanded absolute, crystal-clear honesty. Watching with predatory stillness, the boy waited. Eventually, the cowardly rat desperately swore blind innocence. Suddenly, he gestured toward his companion, revealing a devastating trap. She had secretly branded their elusive attacker. Shocked by his brilliant lie, she blinked. He ordered the guildmaster to detain any man hiding a mystical brand. Instantly terrified, the guilty traitor desperately yanked his sleeves down. Slamming the assassin's blade down, the boy smiled fiercely. This beautiful weapon would become absolute evidence for the authorities. Indeed, this blade will perfectly track our elusive rat, the guildmaster declared, his eyes locking onto the gleaming steel. But before the dust could settle, Lion stepped in, demanding the weapon be granted to Aruto. The law of the strong dictates the victor claims the spoils. Tossing away such a legendary blade would be an absolute crime. The master hesitated, yielding slightly, but Lion was already closing the distance toward Arudo. Shoving the cold steel into Arudo's grip, Lion hyped its legendary aura. He swore its market value was astronomical. Yet, Arudo grimaced, shoving him back, thoroughly annoyed by the unwanted attention. Regaining control, the master demanded absolute order, warning that their defenses required immediate reinforcement. Grinning, Lion swore he had everything handled. With the tension broken, Arudo and Magika slipped away. Magika broke the silence. He was a criminal. Should we have really let him walk? Unfazed, Arudo coldly muttered that a warning was enough. His fate isn't our problem anymore. But Magika's eyes narrowed, was claiming that weapon truly his only ultimate objective. Arudo froze, shooting her a sharp glance. Had she actually pierced through his perfect facade? Shaking off the thought, he embraced the dawn of their true journey. Standing before the abyssal dungeon gates, Arudo stared into its colossal, menacing depths. Tracing his line of sight, Magika whispered that its peak vanished into the very heavens. This was a mythic labyrinth, Arudo declared. A titanic realm whose ancient origins and terrifying scale were lost to the ages. Stepping through the spatial rift, reality warped, teleporting them into an entirely new dimension. The initial abyss, Arudo explained, swallowed the first through 25th floors. It was a mere playground meant for rookies. But mid-sentence, a blood-curdling roar shattered the peaceful atmosphere. Panic erupted. Fleeing adventurers screamed that a high-tier beast had just breached the lower levels. "Run! Your magic is useless against it," they howled. In that split second, a colossal, demon-horned rat barreled straight toward Arudo. Spectators shrieked in absolute terror, begging the seemingly helpless child to sprint for his life. Unflinching against the stampede, Arudo whispered a single command: "Grave." Instantly, the earth shattered, swallowing the beast into an endless, terrifying void. A cold sweat dropped. He had grossly misjudged his own terrifying mana output, nearly catching innocent bystanders in the crossfire. Magika stared into the abyss, utterly paralyzed. The surrounding crowd was equally completely dumbfounded by the apocalyptic crater. Whispers of an earthquake spread, yet the ground had remained still. Playing it cool, Arudo smoothly lied, blaming a random structural collapse. The deathly drop was massive. He warned the panicked crowd to step back as they frantically dispersed. "Why hide your true strength?" Magika pressed. Arudo scoffed lightly, knowing such a ridiculous truth would never be believed anyway. It was time to push forward into the real nightmare above. Crossing into the 26th floor, the labyrinth bared its true fangs. This was the brutal intermediate zone. Instantly, Magika confronted a monstrous bear. Arudo's eyes widened in sheer awe as she obliterated the titan with one devastating strike. Resting near the crushed beast, Magika humbly redirected the praise, nodding at Arudo's own combat prowess. Unsheathing his newly acquired dagger, Arudo hungered to test its edge. The system interface flashed wildly. A massive skill surge registered. Dexterity increased by 110. Electricity coursed through his veins. This legendary weapon was exponentially more terrifying than he had ever anticipated. If only a visual status board existed to track his monstrous growth. Still, this divine blade would be an absolute game-changer for his future arsenal. Yet, complacency was a death sentence. To awaken his true potential, he had to slaughter the savage beasts lurking deeper within. These mid-tier warm-ups were far too weak. His blood boiled for a genuinely life-threatening challenge. Wiping his blade, Arudo set his sights on the brutal upper floors. Leaving a trail of defeated monsters behind, they surged forward. Magika silently analyzed the massacre Arudo had orchestrated. Stepping into the cavernous depths, he was instantly engulfed in bloody combat. A tidal wave of hellish demons swarmed. Yet, an unbreakable confidence blazed in Arudo's eyes. In flashes of destruction, the fiends were pulverized by the very earth Arudo manipulated. Exhaling deeply, he watched their bodies turn to ash. "Welcome to floor 50, Arudo declared grimly. "This is the upper echelon, a deadly slaughterhouse where only the absolute elite dare to tread. The demonic power scaling will skyrocket with every single descent, so we must farm experience and evolve rapidly before moving on." His piercing gaze locked onto the darkness ahead. Magika studied him intensely. Finally, she questioned why his combat style was so bizarrely casual. Arudo blinked in pure shock. Was his technique flawed? Stars shining in his eyes, he practically begged her to reveal any secret martial arts she knew. Flustered, Magika shook her head. She explained that the terrifying fiends he had just effortlessly butchered would normally slaughter even veteran warriors. His godlike ability to casually annihilate entire hordes at once was completely, utterly logic-defying. His sheer power baffled her completely. Confronting him head-on, she demanded the truth behind his impossible strength. Arudo simply tilted his head, questioning if his combat methods seemed unusual. Magika admitted his movements defied all logic to anyone watching, deeply puzzled by his shock at her reaction. A profound realization hit Arudo. Magika was only the second soul, after Hannah, to ever see through his ordinary facade. Memories of his previous life flashed. Even at level 99, he battled every monster alone. While elite adventurers basked in glory, society completely shunned him for his pitiful vitality stat. That was the cruel, unbreakable rule of his former reality. Yet now, Aruto marveled at the shift. Perhaps destiny allowed others besides Hana to break those cruel rules. Burning with intense curiosity, Magika suddenly questioned if he was even human. With a gentle grin, Aruto swore he was completely mortal. Deep down, however, he knew his own claim sounded utterly ridiculous and impossible to believe. After all, he had perished and reincarnated. Captivated by his gentle smile, Magika simply concluded that this mysterious boy was beautifully unique. Aruto flinched at her strange logic. Suddenly, a systemic chime announced a level up, prompting their deeper descent into the abyss. Radiating new confidence, Aruto announced he could crush 50th floor beasts, suggesting they push their absolute limits further. His ancient memories screamed a dark warning. A truly terrifying beast hunted in these shadows. Right on cue, a vicious lesser ogre blocked their path. Remembering the agonizing struggle to kill this creature in his past life, Aruto burned to test his newfound lethality. Facing the bloodthirsty abomination, Magika sensed its suffocating bloodlust, warning that its terrifying aura completely eclipsed every beast they had faced. She quickly offered to strike its blind spots. However, Aruto firmly rejected her help, choosing a solo clash. Panic gripped Magika's heart, fearing his arrogance clouded his mind. One tiny slip meant absolute slaughter. Aruto calmly acknowledged the fatal stakes, craving this perfect trial to measure his power. Unsheathing his blade, he boldly stepped toward death. Exploding into motion, Aruto's blade violently clashed against the beast. Its hide felt exactly like impenetrable steel armor, yet his blade drew blood. Roaring with wild fury, the beast ruthlessly slashed Aruto's face. Evading the deadly follow-up, Aruto realized his strikes were genuinely dealing damage. By weaving through attacks and striking the exact same wound, victory was totally within his grasp. Landing smoothly after a devastating combo, Magika gasped in sheer disbelief. She watched in absolute awe, struggling to comprehend how he slaughtered such a nightmare so effortlessly. Wiping the sweat away, Aruto quietly realized he hadn't even unleashed his full terrifying potential. Maybe this battle reflected his current limits. Suddenly, his loyal slime dropped a massive diamond before him. Inspecting the treasure, he questioned why such a weak beast dropped legendary loot. Suddenly, a suffocating pressure abruptly poisoned the cavern air. Sensing impending doom, Aruto shouted to Magika, asking if she felt that chilling vibration. The confused girl behind him nervously asked what terrifying noise he was talking about. A dark realization hit Aruto. He desperately ordered her to run, but Magika stood paralyzed, whispering that escape was totally impossible. Fleeing guaranteed instant slaughter. From the pitch-black abyss, a Titan-class ogre violently tore into view, its gigantic claw reaching to crush them. Twisted, magical vines completely suffocated this monstrous green beast. It was a parasite that viciously siphoned power from elite hosts. Confronting this titan, Aruto questioned why it roamed the 70th floor. These walking disasters belonged 10 floors deeper. Aruto barely felt confident surviving against the weaker variants. Yet, this overwhelming titan blocked their path. Securing his slime, he shot Magika a desperate glare, commanding her to retreat while they still breathed. Magika fiercely refused him. She felt its suffocating aura, yet knew every beast possessed a weakness. Igniting her gauntlets, she embraced the deadly clash. She bled through endless training to stand beside a true hero, always believing her own combat skills were absolutely unmatched. But witnessing Aruto's legendary strength shattered her pride, proving her past training completely inadequate. Driven by duty, she fearlessly charged the terrifying behemoth, unleashing a devastating strike. Yet, horrifyingly, her explosive blow barely scratched its monstrous hide. The strike merely ignited the beast's blazing fury. Weaving through its lethal counters, Magika discovered her agility vastly outclassed the monster. One desperate blow meant nothing. She needed to rain down a storm of simultaneous destruction. Despite her blinding flurry, the titan whipped her with cursed vines, violently crushing her fragile body within its monstrous grip. Aruto instantly unleashed a savage wind blade, severing the vines and rescuing the gasping girl. He quickly checked on her condition. Breathless, she thanked him, drowning in bitter shame for needing a boy's protection. Blazing with new resolve, Magika glared at the titan and reignited her aura. It holding back was absolutely impossible. Channeling pure starlight through the absolute darkness, she awakened the legendary artifact, Star Rain. With an overwhelming burst of cosmic energy, Magika unleashed devastation upon the monstrous beast. Her mana reserves were completely shattered, surely that ultimate forbidden spell had reduced the terrifying creature to pure ashes. Yet as the heavy smoke cleared, the monstrous nightmare stood perfectly untouched, completely unfazed. A massive, earth-shattering foot cast a deadly shadow straight over her fragile body. Gazing into the abyss of absolute despair, she realized her ultimate strike was utterly useless. Suddenly, the colossal beast crashed violently into the cratered earth below her. Rudo flashed forward like blinding lightning, Snatching her away from the jaws of death, he cradled her safely, swearing to handle this monstrous nightmare himself. Barking a desperate order to his slime companion to guard her, he plunged recklessly straight back into the blazing war zone. Facing this towering catastrophe, retreat was absolutely not an option. Charging into the lethal strike zone, he calculated his severe speed disadvantage until a bone-crushing blow from the Titan violently severed his tactical focus. A heart-wrenching scream tore from her utterly terrified lungs. Choking on dust, his survival instincts deflected the devastating smash. His sharp eyes analyzed the demonic beast, realizing those enchanted vines possessed a fatal weakness to blazing heat. Yet a simple scorch was completely useless. The cursed roots would just infinitely regrow. It required a lethal, one-shot obliteration. Tightening his desperate grip on the blade, he dove back into the merciless fray. Reaching that armored hide head-on was pure suicide. A surgical strike to its absolute core was his only pathetic hope. Locking onto the critical blind spot, he detonated a roaring inferno against the monster's spine. His battered body collapsed desperately, watching the blazing aftermath. A split second later, his vision dissolved into absolute blackness as consciousness completely abandoned him. Frozen in breathless awe, she watched the towering Titan fall, comprehending his miraculous, impossible victory. A mere boy had conquered an overwhelming nightmare. That unbelievable revelation faded away as she spiraled into the soothing dark. Blinking against the harsh sunlight, they woke to their squishy companion bouncing overhead. They laid sprawled on the safe earth, completely bewildered by their miraculous, impossible escape. This tiny blob actually dragged them back from hell. A cheerful, squelching chirp confirmed his unbelievable suspicion. Embracing his squishy savior, he praised her as the absolute greatest partner across the entire realm. Shifting his heavy gaze to his ally, he warned against dropping their guard outdoors. Surviving that horrific wasteland was pure, unadulterated luck. Swallowing her unspoken trauma, she offered a quiet apology, retreating hastily toward their safe haven. Exhausted, he agreed to rest, yet his intense gaze tracked her fading silhouette with absolute shock. Was she genuinely wielding an ancient relic? These legendary divine weapons forged by the heavens themselves were impossibly rare artifacts of mythic proportions. Her terrifying, heaven-shattering tool was known as Star Rain. Dread pooled in his stomach. According to his past life's knowledge, possessing that celestial weapon guaranteed absolute death within 7 years. Under the midnight gloom soaking in boiling water, a chilling realization struck him regarding her hidden divine aura. That holy relic, the legendary hand of justice, forcefully bounds itself exclusively to souls harboring two incredibly cursed conditions. The Holy Vatican branded her as catastrophic threat number 5. Alongside 5 cursed others, she was a hunted enemy of the heavens. Though the holy execution decree wasn't public yet, her inevitable, brutal extermination was already written in the timelines. Summoning his status window, the glowing blue holographic system interface materialized instantly. Scanning the digital interface, he calculated her horrific mortality gauge stood at a grim 4. Deep within that labyrinth, her monstrous mana reserves and absolute defense had completely eclipsed his own. Her overwhelming power was absolutely unmatched. A devastating gap separated their mortal limits, yet his heart sank, realizing the ruthless Holy Church would slaughter her within 7 years. Merging into the silent water, the crushing weight of his absolute powerlessness threatened to completely suffocate his spirit. Was defying this cursed destiny even possible? Suddenly, his squishy companion plopped down, causing him to violently splash upward in shock. Blinking away the water, he playfully questioned if the gelatinous creature craved a deep soak too. Happy bubbling noises answered him, urging him to rise and scrub the dirt from her squishy form. Massaging his tiny companion, he whispered his deepest gratitude for her miraculous rescue. He swore to polish her until she sparkled, sending tremors of joy through her jelly body. Under his gentle care, she sang out a symphony of adorable, squelching purrs. He hesitated mid-scrub. The creature violently shivered from ticklish spots near her base, a completely absurd realization considering gelatinous monsters lacked actual feet. Instantly, she radiated an absolutely blinding, celestial glow. Shielding his eyes, he laughed at her incredibly majestic transformation after a simple bath. Smiling warmly, he gazed at his radiant companion, asking if she was truly content. Rue bounced with pure joy, chirping at Aruto. A heartbeat later, her form dissolved into a shimmering, watery puddle. Chuckling at the sight, Aruto suggested a proper bath, gently nudging the little slime back into the rippling water. Returning to his quarters with the jittery slime in tow, Aruto felt a sudden shift in the atmosphere. Magika stood up from the couch, her voice unusually heavy as she greeted him. Heavy silence hung between them. Sensing her unspoken burden, Aruto gently guided their conversation outdoors. Handing her a warm beverage, he noticed the stifling quiet. She had been completely mute since stepping into the inn. A shadow of doubt crossed his mind. Trying to lift her spirits, Aruto softly praised the breathtaking sunset. Staring at the painted horizon, Magika offered a weak nod. Her knuckles turned white around her cup before she locked eyes with him. Her voice trembled with raw honesty. She confessed her shattered pride, having once believed her magical prowess was absolutely unrivaled. Blinded by past victories, she had grown dangerously arrogant. but recent events brutally exposed her own glaring weaknesses. With burning resolve igniting her gaze, she firmly declared her new path. She needed to pursue solitary, brutal training. Standing in his massive shadow would only stunt her growth. Requesting her own space, she flashed a bittersweet smile. Journeying by his side was the only way she recognized her flaws. She swore an unbreakable oath. Next time, victory would be hers alone. Meeting his unwavering gaze, she laid down an epic challenge. When their paths crossed again, her power would eclipse his own. A sudden thrill coursed through Aruto. His hands shook with sheer excitement before uncontrollable laughter erupted, leaving Magika utterly bewildered. Catching his breath, he apologized for his outburst. He realized true strength was never about innate talent. It was the relentless, agonizing grind that truly mattered. Clinking their cups together, Aruto fiercely promised that he wouldn't face defeat either. He forged a pact to reunite only after multiplying their power 100-fold. Joyous laughter echoed as they celebrated their boundless potential. Yet, they remained blissfully unaware. Hiding in the shadows was a cataclysmic force capable of erasing their existence in a single heartbeat. Retreating to his room, Aruto immediately began his preparations. He meticulously sorted his gear, ensuring his inventory was perfectly prepped for departure. A brief, nostalgic glance at Magika's empty bed brought a fond smile. Closing his eyes, he cemented his unyielding resolve before walking out the door. From that fateful second, time vanished. He plunged headfirst into a brutal, relentless training crucible. His first objective was mastering the art of creation. Guided by system prompts, he ventured deep into an untamed, vibrant woodland. This environment was an absolute goldmine. Overflowing with radiant energy and precious crystals, it was the ultimate sanctuary to forcefully level up his craftsmanship. He channeled his raw aura, systematically pulverizing massive boulders into fine dust. System notifications chimed endlessly. Magical control surged through his veins as he relentlessly mined. Crafting skyrocketed to level 20, instantly awakening the legendary blacksmith class. Exactly as he predicted, this newfound mastery offered devastating attacks like Grave Reaper, while forging magnificent gear from raw dungeon flames and pure magical essence. Forge access was no longer a hurdle. Gripping a newly forged blade, relentless swordplay unexpectedly triggered a magnificent system awakening deep within his soul. Mere heartbeats passed. Clashing against a terrifying cavern beast, reality struck hard. His current strength was simply insufficient to conquer the nightmare of the lower depths. A golden alert flashed. He mastered the art of the blade, shattered the level 40 milestone, and unlocked the devastating two-handed combat style. Drawing his twin weapons, he unleashed a whirlwind of steel upon his foe. Triumphant, his base level instantly skyrocketed once more. A brilliant revelation hit him. Spamming catastrophic abilities like Grave Reaper and Typhoon explosively accelerated their destructive mastery. Fusing raw magic into his strikes, he effortlessly manipulated spatial fissures, amplifying his combat lethality to absolute terrifying heights. His power scaling became monstrous. The system confirmed his ascension to level 40, with every single attribute violently surging by 30 massive points. Mysterious manipulation ability finally unlocked. Curiosity burning, he instantly summoned his glowing holographic interface. The text revealed a psychic technique. By sacrificing pure energy, he could telekinetically bend the trajectory of any physical object. Focusing his aura, he targeted a heavy rock. The boulder violently jerked sideways. It lacked explosive flair, but the tactical potential was undeniable. Sensing its hidden utility in battle, he ruthlessly grinded this telekinetic power to absolute perfection. Weeks bled into a freezing winter. Strolling through the bustling market, hushed whispers of awestruck villagers caught his heightened senses. An incredibly amusing rumor floated through the air. Two rugged adventurers buzzed about an absolute madman dominating the highest dungeon realms. The Phantom slaughtered 1,000 beasts alone. The companion nodded furiously. Legend claimed this unstoppable demon was merely a young boy, inexplicably traveling alongside a pathetic, low-tier slime. Striding past the gossiping duo, a sly smirk crossed his face. As they locked eyes with him, their jaws hit the frozen ground. Elite vanguards never braved those deadly zones without a massive guild. Walking away in silence, he knew his legendary reputation had finally ignited. In the past, his unseen shadows completely swallowed every single one of his glorious achievements. Yet the winds of fate were shifting. Despite loathing that freak label, Aruto scoffed inwardly, eyeing the passing crowd. Returning to his quiet inn, Aruto told the innkeeper he was diving back into the abyss tomorrow, needing his quarters held for 2 to 3 dawns. She warned him of lurking perils, innocently questioning if his female companion remained safe and sound. Reality hit him hard. He had not crossed paths with Magika since parting ways. The innkeeper confessed the mage had vanished for days, sparking immense dread. His grip tightened fiercely upon his heavy coat. He tried assuring himself of her overwhelming might. Yet, a chilling omen crawled up his spine. Suddenly, an armored cavalier thundered into town. Whispers erupted everywhere. The holy sanctuary had deployed its majestic crusader. Panic ignited Aruto. He sprinted outside, completely ignoring the innkeeper's utterly bewildered cries behind him. He stayed silent, his chaotic thoughts spiraling because the timeline he memorized had severely fractured. The grim truth dawned. His interference twisted her destiny too. How could he be so blindly foolish? Dread choked his throat. Did the Holy Order already issue her execution? Was her tragic doom approaching prematurely? He prayed desperately to the heavens for her immediate safety. Speeding past a noble carriage, a shadowy figure smirked through the glass. What an incredibly sharp child. Nearing the monstrous abyss, his heart begged for a miracle. Igniting his aura perception, he scanned for her brilliant magical signature. Catching a familiar silhouette, he screamed her name. She spun around, instantly recognizing him. It has been ages, she smiled softly. Have you been faring well? Feeling her immense spiritual pressure, his suffocating anxiety finally melted away. Gasping for air, he nodded. She tilted her head, wondering why he was utterly out of breath. Too proud to reveal his terrifying panic, he played the fool. He lied about his intense training routine, simply pausing to greet a precious friend. Pulling the warm fabric from his neck, he noticed the freezing winds. Her clothes offered zero protection. He secured it around her, demanding she shield herself from the cold. She beamed with pure gratitude. But suddenly, a terrifying phenomenon poisoned the sky. They froze completely. A sickening void materialized. Its very presence made her soul tremble with profound, indescribable dread. Monstrous shadows swelled. A suffocating pressure crushed them. Recognizing true despair, he desperately ordered her to evacuate everyone. Suddenly, the abyssal void shattered like glass. Aruto shut his eyes, unable to process the absolute nightmare. A supreme infernal lord descended, a legendary beast capable of commanding entire hordes of absolute destruction. Why was an apex predator inside the civilized walls? It instantly unleashed a catastrophic wave of total annihilation. This fiend lived only to reduce the world to ashes. Nothing could quench its endless thirst for slaughter, but his body betrayed him, utterly paralyzed by trauma, just like that horrific inferno from before. The crushing gap in their power levels chained his limbs. His defiant spirit crumbled beneath the world's absolute laws. Still, he fought the invisible chains. If he remained shattered in terror, this entire sanctuary would burn. Suddenly, his warm fabric was returned to his shoulders. She declared with unyielding resolve, "Aruto, you can completely rely on me." Exploding forward, she intercepted the infernal beast. He stared in absolute awe at her majestic, terrifying speed. Her explosive growth was genuinely breathtaking. Her devastating strike connected, but the monster healed its flesh instantly. He calculated the grim truth. Only an absolute, one-hit execution could eradicate this demonic filth. She readied her artifact, Star Rain, but the beast vanished, its lethal claws materializing right behind her spine. Pivoting violently, she narrowly escaped its deadly slash. The aggressive creature completely sealed away her ultimate technique. Amidst the flying rubble and pulverized stone, his mind screamed only for her survival. Why was he still a pathetic bystander? Had his 8 grueling years of hellish training been for nothing? He defied death to rewrite fate, not to watch his loved ones perish in yet another apocalyptic tragedy. Raw desperation sparked a blazing aura around his fists. Glaring at his trembling hands, he prayed for a magical awakening. He prayed for absolute success, locking eyes with her. The beast unleashed a merciless storm of blows. Fighting against hurricane winds, a single mistake meant instant death against this immortal nightmare. She had to wait for the absolute perfect second to unleash her divine relic. Magika launched another desperate strike against the fiend, but was brutally swatted away. Such monstrous power was simply terrifying. Though Aruto frantically gathered his mana, he could never reach her in time. Above them, the beast summoned a colossal sphere of roaring flames. Staring at the blazing inferno, Magika knew her demise was absolute. She squeezed her eyes shut, awaiting oblivion. Suddenly, Aruto unleashed his spatial manipulation. Magika blinked in absolute shock as the devastating inferno was violently dragged into the distance. Aruto gasped at the diverted flames, entirely stunned. Had he really managed to warp the trajectory of such destructive magic? In that exact heartbeat, the monstrous beast stumbled. Glancing at the exhausted youth, Magika felt a surge of resolve. As the colossal fiend collapsed toward her, she finally spotted her lethal opening. "Unleash the Star Rain!" Aruto roared. She instantly summoned a devastating barrage, obliterating the demonic entity into dust. Watching the monster fade into ashes, an overwhelming relief washed over them. Magika immediately rushed to her companion's side, frantically checking his condition. Supporting his trembling frame, Aruto confessed his sudden ascension had drained his energy completely, promising that a brief recovery would revive his power. Completely baffled, he protested as she firmly hoisted him onto her shoulders. She absolutely demanded they retreat to the inn for safety. He stubbornly resisted, but her voice cracked with emotion. He had risked everything for her survival, begging him to let her repay this vital debt. As they escaped through the shadows, she expressed utter amazement at his wildly unconventional combat style. Knowing she meant his telekinetic mastery, Aruto revealed this hidden power had violently awakened after their previous fateful meeting. Demonstrate, his aura flared as his tattered scarf magically materialized around her own neck. Eyes wide with awe, she gasped. He calmly explained his raw mana could now command physical matter entirely to his will. This sacred art could warp raging gales, deflect lethal strikes, and once perfected, could literally command enemy combatants like helpless, living marionettes. It was an absolutely legendary, god-tier ability. Yet he confessed its fatal flaw: total immobility during casting. Without her, death was certain. With a flushed face, he praised her as the city's true savior. Smiling warmly, she insisted they achieved victory together. He laughed, feeling entirely relieved. A grim realization suddenly pierced Aruto's mind. If these catastrophic incursions persisted, the entire kingdom would soon be reduced to rubble. This tragedy never occurred in his past life's memories. Some unknown, unseen hero must have secretly slaughtered the beast back then. Who possessed such monstrous strength? Suddenly, a terrifying pressure assaulted his senses. Racing across the rooftops, he desperately commanded her to freeze immediately. Confused, she protested that sanctuary was still miles away. But his frantic, trembling voice demanded absolute stillness. Trusting his instincts, she froze instantly upon the cold tiles. Hearing below, his blood ran freezing cold. That dark attire, that suffocating, otherworldly aura pulsating like a nightmare, the dread was completely unmistakable. It was the very same executioner who slaughtered Hannah in his forgotten timeline. Standing right there in the shadows was the legendary warlock, Gamagan. Seeing Aruto's utterly traumatized expression, genuine terror gripped her heart. He had never looked this completely shattered. Whispering, she demanded his identity. He coldly named the nightmare, Gamagan Salwe, one of the 12 supreme commanders. A shiver crawled down her spine. The entire continent feared that cursed name, the undisputed, most terrifying sorcerer to ever walk the earth. While she trembled, explosive rage ignited within him as his mana flared violently. Panicking, she frantically questioned his suicidal intentions. Blinded by pure fury, he coldly ordered her back, vowing to slaughter the wizard himself. Desperately grabbing him, she pleaded against such madness. Locking eyes with his madness, she gripped his arm tightly, screaming that his freshly awakened core was completely drained against a literal demigod. He angrily demanded release, but she fiercely held on, begging him to suppress his blinding rage entirely. "Are you insane?" she shrieked in absolute terror. "You will be slaughtered in seconds." The burning adrenaline faded, leaving crushing reality. Facing that monster now meant absolute suicide. Slumping against the cold roof, a suffocating despair completely swallowed his soul. Below them, the sinister warlock coldly inspected his dark handiwork. Trembling subordinate questioned the monstrous invocation, asking if Lord Gamagan had truly orchestrated this unholy catastrophe. The supreme sorcerer calmly confessed his guilt. He casually mentioned acquiring an ancient dimensional relic, treating the devastating trial like a worthless, disappointing game. The pathetic trinket only managed to manifest a worthless brute. Crushing the divine stone into powder, he sighed in utter boredom. "Sadly, some unseen pest exterminated my toy before I could even intervene." Horrified, the lackey stuttered that even such a weak beast possessed enough catastrophic power to wipe a minor kingdom off the map. The 12 supreme commanders were sworn solely to the crown. Committing such treasonous destruction on their own soil was absolute heresy. In terrifying silence, Gamagan's eyes glowed. Invisible, crushing mana brutally hoisted the gasping traitor into the air. Gamagan stared coldly at the dangling victim. He questioned why the fool dared to speak out of turn. Didn't this wretched soul realize that silence would have been his only salvation? Choking on nothing, the victim begged for mercy. The broken figure crashed down. Without a second glance, the dark sorcerer summoned his transport, heading back to the capital for his twisted experiments. From the shadows, a loyal servant approached Gamagan. He nervously asked if the search had failed, questioning if his master would truly walk away empty-handed. Their target had already vanished. Boarding his shadowy carriage, Gamagan pondered his encounter with Aruto and Magika. He had expected pure terror to radiate from Makia's presence. Discovering a sworn enemy of the Holy See here was a thrilling anomaly. That terrifying glare left Aruto and Magika paralyzed. Meanwhile, Gamagan deduced that Makia had single-handedly crushed the demon, confirming her overwhelming strength. He dreamed of harvesting her flesh for forbidden magic. Deliciously wicked ideas flooded his mind, but he restrained himself. The absolute command to annihilate her hadn't been issued yet. Defying the sovereign meant losing his research funding. That was a gamble this sinister mage refused to take. He ordered his driver forward, absolutely certain that the hands of fate would reunite them. Watching the carriage fade away, Aruto and Magika shuddered. The sheer killing intent in those eyes had frozen their souls. Magika trembled, convinced that monster would ultimately slaughter them both. Remembering his terrifying rank as a Euphonia commander, she checked on her companion. Aruto stared down, crushed by his own naive arrogance. How could he ever defeat an absolute monster like that? Clenching his fists, he swore to surpass that nightmare's power before their destined rematch. Days passed. The ruling lord of Kinagris declared his intent to publicly honor Magika for purging the demonic threat, but Magika fiercely rejected the glory. Had they completely forgotten Naruto? Corrupt officials refused to admit a lowly commoner held such devastating might. Met with stubborn pride, the nobleman quietly dropped the matter. Strolling down the bustling streets, Aruto gently probed his friend. Was she truly willing to throw away fame? Magika didn't hesitate. Her voice boiled with frustration over a society utterly blind to the monstrous potential hidden within Aruto. Aruto offered a resigned sigh. In this ruthless era, a person's worth was dictated by status alone. Masking his pain with a smile, he cherished that only she and Hana saw his true value beyond titles. He urged her to ignore the politics and focus her blazing spirit entirely on training. Moved by his unshakable resolve, Magika silently worried if his cheerful mask hid deeper scars. Shrugging it off, Aruto casually announced his plan to raid the abyss again tomorrow. Suddenly, a piercing gaze from the shadows stopped Aruto in his tracks. Sensing the shift in aura, Magika quickly asked what had triggered his combat instincts. He murmured that the stranger looked suspiciously familiar. Peering closer, he recognized the former guild receptionist slumming it on the dirt. There sat Lion, desperately flashing a pathetic cardboard plea for love and shelter. Spotting his former client, Lion's eyes went wide with sudden recognition. He bellowed across the street, pleading to be remembered. Radiating absolute disgust, Aruto coldly denied ever crossing paths. But Lion shamelessly persisted, declaring their fated encounter was entirely unforgettable. Whining about his tragic downfall, he shamelessly begged them for a massive financial bailout. The duo marched past without hesitation. Aruto smoothly changed the subject to dungeon strategy, treating the beggar like absolute invisible trash. Desperation peaking, Lion lunged, weeping as he clung tightly to Aruto's boots. Groaning in utter annoyance, Aruto tried to kick the leech away. He demanded to know where the man's pride had vanished, begging like a stray dog. Refusing to yield, Lion boldly declared he saw infinite potential within them both. Met with deadpan silence, Lion dramatically thumped his chest. He pitched the ultimate fantasy, forming an unstoppable adventuring squad together. He grandly reintroduced himself as an elite adventurer, desperately pitching an alliance that would rewrite their destinies. Bragging that extra manpower is crucial for survival, he threw in a shocking twist to seal the deal, claiming the legendary, ultra-rare hero class as his own. Yet Aruto's icy smile proved he wasn't buying a single word. Baffled by the rejection, Lion complained loudly. Aruto brutally noted that a legendary title meant nothing on absolute dead weight. Magika let out a bored yawn while Lion groveled in the dirt, crying that he sacrificed his stable guild career for this glorious dream. Aruto saw right through it, coldly firing back. You were definitely caught stealing and banished. Lion's jaw dropped in sheer panic. His pathetic cover was completely blown, realizing he had underestimated this terrifyingly sharp duo. Sighing at the absolute absurdity, Aruto muttered that dealing with human garbage is exactly why he prefers fighting dungeon monsters instead. Out of nowhere, Lion lunged at the protagonist, desperately pleading to join their elite squad. Reaching her limit, Magika shoved some stale rations into his hands, fiercely demanding he stop testing their sanity. Crushed, the boy collapsed into the dirt, watching the powerful duo fade into the whispering shadows. Starving for a decent meal, Magika complained aloud. Smiling, our hero promised to reveal a hidden tavern he recently unearthed. Fast forward 3 days. Deep within the labyrinth, a brutal massacre unfolded. Slaughtering the horde pushed him to level 42. His swordsmanship hit 43, proving his newly crafted weapon was an absolute masterpiece. Yet, despite the passing week, that stubborn stalker refused to vanish. While planning to raid the upper zones, desperate screams and thundering footsteps shattered the cavern's silence. The persistent kid exploded from the gloom. Bloodthirsty beasts snapped at his heels, leaving our warrior completely speechless. Shrieking for salvation, the boy prayed for rescue. Roaring at him to hit the deck, our protagonist unleashed a devastating inferno upon the rabid pack. Awestruck by the sheer power, the survivor gasped. Sprinting toward the trembling kid, he found him bowing endlessly, praising his savior with tearful gratitude. He confessed his reckless trailing led him straight into this death trap. Fury flared in our hero's eyes. Rookies belong in the grave here. Unfazed, the stubborn fool begged to join their ranks. Boiling with frustration, he roared that useless dead weight would only drag them down. Playing babysitter was not on his agenda. Groveling in the dust, the weakling whispered his regrets. Turning his back, the master coldly banished him to the surface. Suddenly, a surviving predator launched a lethal ambush. Reacting with lightning speed, our swordsman obliterated the beast. Spinning toward the fallen boy, he dreaded finding a mangled corpse. Dropping to the blood-stained floor, sheer horror gripped his heart. Suffocating guilt crashed over him like a tidal wave. Had he just shown mercy earlier, this gruesome tragedy could have been entirely avoided. Catching that sliver of pity, the supposedly dead boy leaped to his feet, eyes blazing with wild hope. Paralyzed by disbelief, the swordsman watched the kid casually massage his torn throat, dropping a massive bombshell. He was a creature of the night. Mind blown, our hero remembered the legends of immortal bloodsuckers ruling the darkness. Humanity dreads their very existence. Pointing a trembling finger, he demanded the absolute truth. Shrugging, the immortals shattered those myths, claiming mortal bedtime stories wildly exaggerated their demonic nature. Biologically, they shared mortal weaknesses. A devastating strike to a vital organ meant certain death. However, this specific outcast possessed a legendary, unbreakable constitution. Did this hidden power grant infinite regeneration? Curiosity piqued, the warrior demanded the dark origins of this godlike endurance. Sighing heavily, the survivor hinted at a tragic past, revealing an unnatural immunity to all suffering. Desperate for answers, our protagonist pushed harder, wondering if this divine shield could be learned. Shaking his head, the boy declared this power impossible to train. It was an absolute anomaly, born of tragedy. Warning that the truth sounded like madness, he finally dropped the ultimate secret. He was an otherworldly reincarnator. Once a mundane citizen of modern Japan, a sudden fatal tragedy hurled his soul into this fantasy realm. Facing oblivion, pure, suffocating terror had eclipsed his dying mind. Begging the heavens for salvation, he awoke immortal. Processing this insane lore, our hero realized other transmigrators must exist. But this miraculous pain immunity was not a starting gift from the system. It awakened through pure agony. Initially, this alternate reality felt like an absolute paradise. Gifted with eternal youth, zero fear of dying, and a glorious heroic destiny. He believed he was the ultimate main character. But that sweet illusion violently shattered soon after. A holy crusade painted the kingdom red. Righteous zealots slaughtered his entire family in cold blood before his eyes. Cursed with immortality, the Inquisitors dragged the demon spawn into their holy sanctuary. What followed was an eternity of righteous torture. His flesh refused to perish, absorbing every agonizing strike. Endless torment made him beg for death's sweet embrace. Yet, his life force persisted. After 50 agonizing years, his mind completely snapped, shattering his pain receptors. Total numbness became his shield. Standing amidst roaring holy flames, the broken survivor finally shattered his chains and fled into darkness. Surviving centuries in the shadows, his endless flight finally ended at the local adventurers' guild. His tragic, unbelievable tale finally concluded. The vampire warned Aruto that copying this divine ability was impossible. The sheer, devastating nightmare Lion had survived left the protagonist completely speechless. Guilt washed over him for reopening those psychological wounds. Flashing a bitter smile, Lion brushed it off. The nightmare was history. Yet, a shadow crossed his eyes as he revealed his deepest sorrow. If he possessed true power, his beloved family would still be breathing. That brutal truth haunted his soul. Those words shattered Aruto, triggering memories of his past life. Seeking ultimate power, not just coin, was the vampire's true reason for joining. He pleaded for an alliance once more, but the main character simply turned his back and walked away. Watching in silence, Lion felt utterly rejected. Suddenly, Aruto threw down the gauntlet, demanding to know his intentions. He smirked, daring the vampire to follow unless he was terrified of surviving a hellish training regimen. His eyes sparked with thrill, embracing the brutal combat with boundless excitement. Watching the immortal toy with low-level beasts, Aruto realized understanding his endless torment was completely impossible. Their burning desire to protect loved ones was identical. He refused to abandon a kindred spirit, igniting their intense mentorship. Plunging into bloody combat, Aruto unleashed the devastating aura of the Grave Reaper. An overwhelming horde of monsters ambushed the vampire, forcing him to scream for backup. Watching the swarm, Aruto knew his disciple had to abandon human instincts. While the master annihilated beasts, the trembling pupil desperately dodged the deadly onslaught. Strategy mattered, but Aruto roared a critical lesson. As a creature boasting terrifying physical prowess, holding back was lethal. Tossing him a blade, Aruto sparked a blazing fire within Lion, who instantly charged the demonic swarm. Cleaving through flesh, the blood-soaked vampire bowed to his master, finally embracing his true monstrous nature. In that breathtaking moment, the disciple's legendary potential awakened. Watching the majestic blade dance, the master questioned his combat rank. The vampire calmly revealed his level was 4. This exact ranking mirrored Magika's power. Pouring his absolute soul into this mentorship, Aruto pushed them toward unprecedented mastery. The vampire's life force exploded. Shedding his clumsy mortal habits, his destructive power quickly eclipsed his master's expectations. He obliterated chaotic dungeon realms at an absolutely heaven-defying pace. Every 10 brutal floors, Magika joined their raid to decimate area overlords. the labyrinth fell effortlessly. Standing over a shattered monstrosity, the vampire proudly declared their conquest speed would go down in legendary history. Slaying the 90th floor's tyrant was a miracle Magika never imagined. 6 grueling years later, breathing heavily over a titan's corpse, Aruto bowed to his comrades. The absolute summit beckoned, yet the sands of his hourglass were mercilessly draining. The battlefield was evolving into pure nightmare. The destined tragedy of Hana's demise was merely 12 terrifying months away. Packing his gear, the hero prepared to vanish. The frantic guild staff begged to confirm his shocking departure. Nodding solemnly, he expressed his deepest gratitude. Heartbroken, the receptionist desperately asked where his path led, confessing her loneliness. His fate was bound to an elite magic academy deep within Euphonia's grand capital. Suddenly, frantic footsteps echoed as his 2 loyal companions stormed down the stairway. Desperation in his eyes, Lion demanded the truth about this exodus. Beside him, Magika stood stunned by his sudden, silent escape. He had planned a solitary exile. Gazing into their fierce eyes, he braced himself as they furiously demanded answers. With a heavy heart, the hero murmured that a final farewell was his only intention. Only 1 year remained until Hana's doomed fate. Shielding her required immense sacrifice, and a blood-soaked clash with Gamagan was inevitable. This apocalyptic war would cost his soul, a burden he refused to dump on allies. Sensing the crushing weight on his master's shoulders, Lion quietly acknowledged his hidden burdens. Blazing with resolve, Magika stepped forward, swearing her loyalty. A 6-year-old life debt demanded she stand by his side. She strictly forbade him from abandoning their bond. Pulling his master into a fierce embrace, Lion grinned, vowing that a loyal disciple blindly follows his teacher. Throughout those grueling 6 years, no warrior had forged a more unbreakable spirit. Stealing her aura, Magika promised they would become his absolute shield against any looming catastrophe. Stunned by their fiery devotion, a genuine laugh escaped his lips. Destiny had bound them as one unstoppable party. The legendary trio finally embarked on their rumbling carriage ride. Passing through treacherous peaks, the vampire casually yawned, whining about boredom. 4 entire days had slipped away on this bumpy road. Where was this endless journey heading? Aruto smirked. Once they conquered the mountain path, Juan's own eyes would witness the truth. Bored, he could join Aruto's relentless meditation. The swordsman was already channeling his core mana. Beside him, Magika watched Aruto's silent power in pure awe. Juan politely refused, joking that only a monster like Aruto grew stronger by simply breathing. Curiosity sparked, Magika then pressed for their grand strategy regarding Euphonia. Aruto dropped a bombshell. He intended to attend school. Not just any place, but the Royal Court's elite academy, the nation's most prestigious sanctuary. Dumbfounded, one questioned why a powerhouse needed textbooks. Aruto merely offered a cold, stoic silence. Bam! The carriage violently lurched, nearly launching a screaming one overboard. Aruto and Mika exchanged alarmed looks. Their panicked driver yelled that a wheel was hopelessly buried in deep mud, warning that their entire journey might face a devastating halt. Magika looked to Aruto for a miracle. Defeated, Aruto heavily dragged his hands down his face. Rising to his feet, he met Magika's eyes. Their destiny required them to march on foot. Step aside, Wyan boldly interrupted, demanding they trust his sheer strength instead. Doubting him, the sweating driver nervously asked if Aruto could pry the heavy wheel free. Scoffing, Wyan confidently undid his heavy leather belt. He ordered the terrified driver to abandon the broken wreckage, taking only the horse back to safety. Boom! Wyan ripped the earth itself apart, hoisting the entire land chunk and sprinting into the wild mountains. He felt like an epic hero delivering salvation. Plus, blazing speed was exactly what they desperately needed. Slamming the earth down, one proudly faced his master, expecting high praise for his monstrous raw power. Peeking inside, he found Mika and Aruto painfully tangled in a battered heap. Someone should have calculated that terrifying momentum. Veins popping, a furious Aruto dragged one near, threatening abandonment if he ever unleashed that madness again. Nursing a swollen bruise, one softly grumbled. Surely his master secretly loved their lightning-fast travel speed. Looking back at their dust trail, he smirked triumphantly. Ahead, Euphonia's majestic capital finally pierced the grand horizon. Aruto tossed luggage duty to Magika and won, aggressively pushing forward alone into the streets. Dashing toward the towering gates, Aruto's racing mind completely consumed by one absolute thought. Hana. His precious, irreplaceable Hana was breathing this very air. Their tragic shared history fiercely drove him toward that royal academy. Even if harsh fate denied their romance this lifetime, his soul desperately ached to witness her face. Across town, Hana froze in the bustling streets. Her concerned companion noticed her suddenly trembling, wide-eyed reaction. Hana gasped, clutching her furiously pounding chest. It felt like a soulmate was standing impossibly close, an electric shock she never knew existed. Her companion smiled softly. Heavens will work mysteriously. Perhaps your fated true love is lurking right around the corner. Captivated by this whisper of a fated lover, Hannah desperately wondered about his true identity. The woman chuckled knowingly. Fate keeps its secrets. But fear not, your soul will instantly recognize him upon contact. Hannah doubted how she'd identify a complete stranger, yet the red string of cosmic destiny weaves perfectly flawless webs. At that exact heartbeat, Erudo stepped from the shadowy tunnel. Destiny placed him mere inches away from her presence. Lion and Magika finally arrived. Scanning the majestic architecture, Lion grinned, declaring this grand capital perfectly suited Aruto's legendary aura. Rejoining them, Aruto questioned his bizarre statement. Lion eagerly explained that epic metropolises like this always overflowed with glorious hero quests. Speechless, Aruto quickly clarified that this specific city, as the kingdom's beating core, sheltered 3 million souls. Pointing decisively, he guided Lion's awestruck eyes toward the royal fortress and its towering government districts. Elite noble estates dominated the streets, while the massive, intimidating Fortimus Church ruthlessly glared down at the royal palace. He firmly demanded absolute stealth, considering the dangerously powerful elites lurking inside. Suddenly spotting Fortimus inside the sanctuary, Lion recoiled in disgust, swearing he would never go anywhere near her. Securing their quiet tavern inn, Aruto sharply questioned Magika and Lion about their upcoming moves. He needed extreme focus for the brutal academy entrance trials. Lion's jaw dropped, shocked that heroes required written tests. Erudo scoffed, stating such cruel trials were mandatory for the Empire's most legendary elite training ground. It was smaller than Kintigress, this capital possessed both a guild and a dark dungeon. Aruto smirked, knowing they'd easily find bloody adventures. Passing them his coordinates, Aruto firmly ordered them to send distress signals if true danger sparked. Lion nodded confidently. Sharing a knowing look with Magika, they vanished, leaving Aruto to his destiny. Stepping onto the grand grounds of the Royal Court Academy, Aruto surveyed the overwhelming sea of aspiring candidates. With 10,000 ambitious souls battling for a mere 100 positions, locating Hannah in this chaotic ocean seemed completely impossible. Wandering deeper into the courtyard, he suddenly paused. An ordinary stone bench caught his gaze, violently pulling him back into the memories of his previous existence. This was their sacred sanctuary, a place they always shared. 70 long years had vanished, yet his burning resolve remained. If he conquered this trial, he would find her. But then, a disturbance broke his focus. Lion was desperately begging a stern academy official, praying she would bend the ironclad rules for them. The cold official ruthlessly denied his plea. Stepping out of the shadows, Aruto demanded answers. Seeing him, Lion immediately abandoned his shameless begging. Magika proudly declared they came to prove their power in this grueling trial, but Lion instantly exposed her lie, confessing her true mission was purely to secure Aruto a spot inside. A devastating smack instantly silenced Lion. Sprawled on the dirt, he whined loudly, questioning the sheer brutality of her sudden, heavy-handed assault. Towering over him, she coldly scoffed. Had she unleashed her true power, his fragile body would be completely shattered on the ground. The academy official interrupted their chaos, coldly demanding the mandatory entrance fee. Shock painted Aruto's face at this sudden financial roadblock. Still eating dirt, Lion shamefully confessed their utter bankruptcy and their failed diplomatic begging. Furious, Aruto snapped, demanding to know where their massive fortune went. Magika sighed heavily, exposing Lion's catastrophic greed. He had completely drained their treasury, devouring luxury feasts in the high-class district. As a dark aura of scolding anger radiated from Aruto, an arrogant voice sliced through the tension, mocking the utterly pathetic noise of this year's trash. A violent blast of wind magic suddenly erupted, violently throwing their balance off. A towering figure manifested from the gales, sneering that this prestigious sanctuary of noble bloodlines had no room for filthy, uncultured commoners. Aruto recognized Deutsch instantly. Lion fiercely barked, questioning this arrogant intruder. He mocked the blatant hypocrisy of this so-called noble elite casually launching offensive magic at completely defenseless applicants in broad daylight. Fists clenched tight, Lion radiated fighting intent, welcoming a brutal clash right here. Aruto instantly blocked his path, forcing Lion to stand down. Assaulting an academy instructor would absolutely obliterate their chances of passing. Memories flooded Aruto's mind. This pathetic professor had always been blindly obsessed with royal bloodlines and elite aristocratic breeding over actual talent. The elitist instructor interrogated their filthy peasant roots with absolute disgust. His mocking gaze finally locked onto Aruto. He scoffed loudly, daring to ask if a pathetic level 1 weakling seriously hoped to survive here. Aruto simply stared back, completely unfazed by the sudden hostility. Waving him off like trash, Deutsch ordered the boy to crawl back home. With a staggering 0% survival rate, spending gold here was pure stupidity. Shooting a venomous glare at Magika and Lion, he coldly declared his miserable lackeys would also hopelessly fail. A chilling calmness washed over Aruto. This fool crossed the line, and Arudo mentally thanked him for the motivation. Slamming a heavy sack of gold onto the counter, Arudo fearlessly announced his inevitable victory. He would crush this trial completely. Actions speak louder than arrogant barking. He trusted the Academy's true masters would recognize raw, undeniable power, completely ignoring the petty bias of a trash instructor. Arudo walked away. Deutsch glared intensely at the departing trio. Such unbridled arrogance sickened him. A miserable level 1 insect actually dared to strut around like a future legend of the Academy. A wicked smirk formed. He could not wait to watch this pathetic boy be utterly humiliated. Swirling his cape, the professor vanished into the shadows. The brutal two-phase assessment was officially commencing. First came the punishing written gauntlet, followed by a deadly combat trial. The nervous candidates filed into the suffocating examination hall. Rudo stared at the tactical nightmare. He had to synchronize a cavalry unit moving at 10 kilometers per hour. Next was an infantry squad marching at 4, alongside a massive siege caravan barely crawling at 2. All forces needed to hit a war zone 30 kilometers out simultaneously. Effortlessly crunching the numbers, Arudo casually shot a worried glance toward his struggling comrade. Lion was sweating buckets under the immense pressure. Meanwhile, Magika. Her pen danced across the paper with flawless precision, proving her brutal training paid off. Smirking, Arudo knew he had to secure total dominance here too. Suddenly, Deutsch loomed over his desk like a grim reaper, quietly mocking the stupidity of a level 1 attempting this impossible trial. Brains meant nothing without brawn. The malicious instructor silently vowed to show zero mercy during the combat phase, a bloody arena he personally controlled. With an echoing strike of his dark cane, Deutsch declared the survival battle was finally about to begin. Staring down the trembling recruits, he commanded them to completely shatter the mystical artifact hovering center stage. Deutsch smirked, declaring that all methods were permitted, yet victory remained entirely out of reach. High above, our heroes locked their eyes on the unfolding spectacle. As the professor commanded, candidates hurled everything at the artifact, yet it wouldn't even suffer a scratch. Watching the pathetic display, Deutsch jotted down a harsh truth. Another pathetic generation of utter failures. Observing the endless stream of defeats, the arrogant examiner scoffed. Shatter a top-tier magic seal? Utterly impossible. But then, Magika confidently took the stage, while Lion screamed at the top of his lungs, begging for a spectacular show. She coldly ordered him to shut his mouth. Deutsch narrowed his eyes at the squirrel beastkin. She was the troublemaker from admissions. Her name tickled his memory, but he quickly brushed the nagging feeling aside. Mere beast, she'll foolishly rely on raw, unrefined power. But this barrier is absolute perfection. Half-hearted strikes won't even leave a dent, he mocked. Yet, Magika effortlessly hoisted the heavy relic, her sharp eyes instantly unraveling its complex, magical core. With one flawless, devastating blow, the unbreakable seal cracked, then exploded into dust. The arena absolutely exploded. Spectators leaped to their feet, roaring in pure awe at the Beast Girl's jaw-dropping, legendary feat. Deutsch's jaw hit the floor, his brain completely short-circuited. That wasn't just some blindingly fast, fiercely accurate haymaker. Staring at the powdered remnants, the horrifying truth dawned on him. She hadn't struck once. She unleashed a terrifying barrage upon a single, microscopic vulnerability. Then, a chilling realization struck like lightning. Magika Estate Terra, the absolute anomaly, the walking disaster officially classified by the Vatican. Why would such a monster enroll here? He gasped in terror. Swallowing his immense pride, he announced her victory. Lion approached next. Striding forward with terrifying swagger, the boy claimed his turn. Deutsch sneered in contempt, seeing nothing but an arrogant clown, definitely not a world-ending threat. But then, Lion summoned a terrifying sphere of energy above the relic, ominously warning the crowd. Boom! Absolute, blinding devastation wiped the stage clean. Deutsch desperately raised his staff, completely paralyzed by the overwhelming, catastrophic shockwave. Surrounded by a million vaporized shards, Lion smiled innocently. Was that a decent hit? The professor's soul practically left his body. He gaped at the smirking youth. Throughout his entire prestigious career, he had never witnessed such pure, unadulterated annihilation of the relic. Boiling with humiliated rage, the proctor roared his approval. Leaning in close, Lion cheekily accepted the win, mocking the trembling instructor by asking if he was completely uninjured. Sweating profusely, Deutsch croaked out the next candidate's name. His pale, exhausted face desperately screamed for an immediate mental break. Miraculously, the devastated arena repaired itself. The professor remained completely paralyzed. How did unschooled brats, alongside a Vatican-level calamity, completely vaporize the most secure testing facility in the world? This defies all logic. Deutsch screamed during the faculty meeting, desperately relaying the historically catastrophic, absolutely mind-bending scores. The high-ranking council murmured in deep, overwhelming, paranoid dread. Is welcoming these walking disasters actually a wise choice? Another countered, eyes gleaming with greed. They possess undeniable Tier 4 power. Drafting them into Euphonia's forces will secure absolute prestige for us. But murmurs of their chaotic nature sparked fierce debate. Suddenly, the entire room silenced, staring at Deutsch for the final verdict. Admitting their undeniable flaws, he gritted his teeth. True Tier 4 talents are unbelievably rare. We cannot simply throw this away. The faculty greedily agreed. Under his strict, unforgiving discipline, these monsters could become legendary weapons. Swayed by his burning determination, the council officially approved their enrollment. Scanning the files, Deutsch glared at one particular, sickening name. Aruto, a wretched dropout from the lowest tier. By all academy laws, this absolute trash rightfully belonged in the gutter. A deeply sinister shadow clouded his mind, admitting that garbage would eternally stain their pristine legacy. Without hesitation, he maliciously infused the trial block with forbidden magic. He swore to crush the boy's dreams instantly. Smirking, he summoned a hyper-reinforced obelisk directly onto the bloody battlefield. Declaring the arena fully operational, he restarted the brutal trials. In his dark heart, he swore no lower-class rat would ever survive this test. This wasn't normal. It possessed forbidden absorption traits. Every single strike it absorbed would only exponentially multiply its indestructible defense. Even a supreme grandmaster of the mystic arts would shatter their fists against it. With a wicked grin, he initiated the slaughter. But the shadow stepping forward wasn't Aruto. Deutsch silently raged, his venomous trap momentarily thwarted by an unexpected extra. He completely miscalculated the order. 3 participants had already taken their turn. This unknown kid hadn't even registered with the chaotic trio. Glaring with utter disdain at the obvious weakling, the professor coldly barked at him to attack. The amateur unleashed his pathetic assault. Watching the embarrassing display, Deutsch snickered internally. Is this the absolute limit of modern trash? Zero aura control. Absolutely no magical flow. Why did I even stress over that loser Aruto when this pathetic worm is astronomically more dreadful? Smirking triumphantly, he prepared to scream out of failure. But suddenly, the indestructible relic began twisting into something completely horrifying. Deutsch stood frozen in absolute disbelief. A catastrophic surge of crimson mana violently exploded from the once dormant cube. He staggered backward, his mind reeling. The entire crowd gazed down, completely paralyzed by the terrifying spectacle below. Mere seconds ago, the crowd was praising the last student's brilliance. Now, this unprecedented crisis completely shattered that carefree atmosphere. Pure arcane power raged out of control. Leaping from the stands, Aruto commanded an immediate evacuation, vowing to crush the surging anomaly. Touching the ground, a devastating magical vortex manifested right before his eyes. This wasn't merely wild energy. A far more sinister force was awakening. Aruto immediately spotted Deutsch crumbling beneath the crushing spiritual pressure, his defensive spells practically useless. One wrong move right now, an absolute catastrophe would strike. Deutsch desperately lunged to shield the student, suddenly realizing his mana reserves were completely drained. Bloodshed was practically guaranteed. Swallowed by the furious storm, Deutsch manifested a desperation barrier, only to watch it instantly crack. His strength was failing. Suddenly, Aruto unleashed his Absoluton Thorfully, Tempest, subduing the raging tempest. Deutsch collapsed in pure shock. Calmly stepping forward, Aruto checked on the terrified survivors. Trembling, Deutsch demanded to know how he survived. I merely followed protocol, Aruto stated coldly. Your only priority was casting barriers and protecting lives. Leave the magical suppression entirely to me, he commanded. His pride wounded, Deutsch snapped back, claiming he could have easily resolved the crisis himself. Aruto simply stared right through him. Panic struck the instructor. He screamed the artifact was highly volatile, and one microscopic tremor would trigger a fatal detonation. Unfazed, Aruto extended his palm, pouring his overwhelming aura into the relic to forcefully suppress the chain reaction. Deutsch could only stare in awe. Did he truly suppress that monstrous energy? Despite his wounds, Aruto relentlessly locked down the artifact's core, safely securing the silenced object. A rare suppression spell was undoubtedly woven into this, he analyzed. He revealed the truth. Because this elite academy only accepted magical prodigies, the faculty remained completely oblivious to a trap designed to trigger exclusively upon contact with pathetic, low-tier mana. It possessed a bizarre curse that violently crippled its own magical output. Utterly floored, Deutsch desperately demanded to know his true identity. The instructor swallowed hard. He finally realized this unbelievable powerhouse was actually just a commoner from the absolute lowest slums. It proved that relentless grinding could overcome any pathetic bloodline. Without warning, the drained magical artifact violently fractured into countless worthless pieces. Deutsch officially declared Aruto victorious. The crowd immediately erupted, fiercely congratulating the surviving candidates. Later, inside a premium boutique, they eagerly tried on their prestigious academy uniforms. The merchant warmly praised their incredible exam results. Decked out in pristine tailored fabric, Aruto and his comrades radiated absolute main character energy. Tugging at his crisp collar, Lion swore he had never touched such ridiculously high-quality material before. Naruto smiled, praising how perfectly the noble aesthetic fit the wild warrior. Catching him completely off guard, a flustered Lion spun around, awkwardly demanding what he meant by that. Suddenly, Magika stepped out, bitterly complaining about the restrictive fabric and begging for more comfortable gear. Forced into a delicate skirt, she whined that the flimsy design severely nerfed her combat mobility. Not to mention, her toes were absolutely freezing. Both boys instantly dropped their jaws, teasingly admitting the elegant dress totally transformed her into a high-class noblewoman. Lion wickedly roasted her, joking that even a log looks pretty wearing a golden headdress. Bam! Magika ruthlessly smacked his head, barking that peasants shouldn't speak. Rubbing his bruised skull, they finally bought their clothes. The cheerful merchant smoothly checked if their custom magical measurements were perfectly aligned. Everyone gave a confident thumbs up. Sliding over the invoice, the tailor noted production would take 2 weeks, demanding exactly 10 gold coins per head. Staring at the astronomical bill, they stood completely paralyzed. Wait, Academy gear wasn't totally free? Sensing their massive internal panic, Naruto casually glanced back, wondering why they looked so pale. Sweating profusely, Lion shrieked that 10 gold could feed a normal family for 6 entire months just for some basic threads. Finally grasping that his friends were absolutely broke, Naruto sighed heavily. With literally zero alternatives, the overpowered protagonist generously offered to cover their massive debt. Magika fiercely rejected his charity, arguing it was shameless, since he already bankrolled their entrance fees. Desperate, the frantic trio begged the merchant for a grace period. Thankfully, the kind tailor casually agreed they could definitely pay upon final delivery. Without hesitating, they violently grabbed Naruto by the collar, dragging him straight toward the mercenary guild to furiously hunt down high-paying bounty quests. Completely bewildered, Naruto weakly protested being forcefully dragged into their desperate financial grind. Lion shamelessly declared that their esteemed mentor couldn't possibly abandon his poor disciples in such dire financial trouble. Reaching the guild, the desperate squad intensely scanned the massive board for lucrative mercenary quests. Scanning the quest board, they found mere goblin hunts paying 12 copper and giant rat bounties for 20 silver. Lion sighed, these payouts are completely worthless. At this miserable pace, gathering 10 gold in 2 weeks is impossible, even with all these minor bounties leading up to the royal capital. But then, Lion's eyes locked onto a single, unbelievable bounty, a staggering 30 gold reward. Naruto narrowed his eyes at Lion, instantly suspicious. What kind of insane mission paid that kind of fortune? Reading the parchment, Lion gasped. The target was a fiery dragon ruling the northern peaks. Naruto immediately slammed the idea down. Pure suicide. Shocked, the group demanded answers. Naruto's voice dropped. Dragons were mythical apex predators, ancient survivors from the Divine War 150 years ago. Just one awakening could trigger an absolute apocalypse, easily wiping an entire kingdom off the map. Trembling at the thought of such devastation, Magika questioned if those nightmarish beasts were actually real. Naruto grimly confirmed their existence. Though rare, they lurked in the shadows. In his past life, he had actually faced one of these titans in brutal combat. Yet even at max level 99, his only option was to run for his life. Lion swallowed hard, asking if the threat was truly that catastrophic. If that's true, he muttered, 30 gold is a total joke. It doesn't match the deadly risk at all. From my guild experience, a bounty like this demands at least 1,000 gold coins. Naruto knew Lion was completely right. Frowning, Magika turned to the former clerk, wondering if this quest was just a dangerous prank. Gripping the bounty poster tightly, Lion firmly shook his head. The guild's oversight committee would have instantly shredded it. They show zero mercy toward false intel around here, he explained. A spark ignited in Naruto's mind. This was his chance to rewrite fate. A deeper secret was buried in this mission, he realized. Burning with fierce curiosity, Naruto declared they were taking the job. Nodding in agreement, Lion sprinted off to secure the official guild paperwork. Naruto warned everyone to brace themselves. Facing a mythical beast demanded absolute, flawless preparation. But lurking in the shadows, unseen eyes watched their every move. 1 week later, the party was back in the heat of battle. Standing victorious atop a giant fallen boar, Magika let out an exhausted groan. We've scoured the entire area, but we're only finding low-tier trash. Maybe that poster was a massive lie after all. Scanning the quiet woods, Lion completely rejected that theory. Stepping toward the beast's carcass, Naruto noticed the darkening sky and ordered them to make camp. Pitching their tents under the twilight sky, the tired companions gathered around a roaring campfire for dinner. Savoring the hearty meal, Lion smiled warmly, calling these shared dinners the greatest treasure of their journey. Meanwhile, Naruto silently inspected a glistening slime core. He muttered that cashing in their harvested loot and mana crystals would easily fund their new combat gear. Though deeply frustrated by the missing dragon, Naruto finally conceded. They would retreat to Euphonia at the first light of dawn. Staring into the flames, Magika softly confessed how much her heart would ache once their shared journey ended. Arudo's gaze softened, admitting the feeling was entirely mutual. But before the night ended, he had a special surprise to reveal. Eyes wide with curiosity, his friends eagerly asked what he was hiding. Arudo revealed gorgeous pendants, forged from his absolute mastery of blacksmithing and infused with his raw aura. Clutching the artifact, Magika gasped at the mysterious, overwhelmingly powerful energy radiating from it. Arudo reflected on his past life, where he fully expected a destiny of endless isolation. Yet here they were, sharing a blazing campfire. He never imagined such comforting warmth in his future. These pendants were his silent promise and deepest gratitude. Flashing a rare smile, Arudo thanked his comrades before they finally surrendered to a peaceful sleep. Suddenly, Arudo's eyes bolted open. A suffocating, demonic heat completely shattered his rest. The others jolted awake, choking on the blistering temperature. Tearing open the tent, they found the entire forest consumed by apocalyptic hellfire. Was the mythical beast finally here? Without warning, an earth-shattering roar ripped through the blazing canopy. Staring into the inferno, absolute dread washed over them. It truly was a dragon. The guild's terrifying bounty was completely real. Wreathed in violently swirling flames, the monster's presence screamed at them to flee. Yet, in that absolute chaos, Lion panicked over dropped loot. His comrades violently yanked him forward, screaming to abandon the gems and run. A devastating pillar of dragon fire annihilated the exact spot Lion just stood. They barely dodged death, though Lion's boots actively smoked from the blistering blast. Trapped, a towering wall of inferno completely sealed them inside. Gripped by despair, Magika screamed that there was absolutely nowhere left to run. Backed into a deadly corner, their only path to survival meant slaughtering this legendary beast. Arudo's mind raced back to his past life. The dragons he previously battled possessed divine intelligence, even conversing in human tongues. This mute, smaller monstrosity defied all logic. Arudo's instincts screamed that this silent mutation was infinitely deadlier. Gritting his teeth, he locked in. If he surrendered to terror now, he could never save Hannah. Erasing all hesitation, Arudo unleashed a devastating water slash, aiming straight for the fiery tyrant's absolute elemental weakness. Instantly, the ancient beast erected an impenetrable energy barrier. This unforeseen defense left Arudo utterly paralyzed. He knew instantly that Magika lacked the firepower to shatter it. Yet, refusing to back down, the fierce mage surged forward to assist. Lion charged alongside her, launching a synchronized assault. But upon impact, a terrifying realization crashed over Magika regarding the monster's absolute physical dominance. Her current level of firepower wouldn't even scratch this legendary calamity. Flashing back to his previous life's battle experience, Arudo deduced the Leviathan must harbor a fatal flaw. He desperately roared at Magika to draw the monster's gaze. While Arudo prepared a devastating strike, Magika unleashed everything to bait the beast's fury, but her desperate provocations were completely useless. Narrowly dodging a roaring inferno, Lion screamed in pure frustration, absolutely baffled as to why the nightmare ruthlessly hunted him down without any provocation. Though shifting tactics mid-battle was incredibly risky, Arudo knew his immortal comrade's aggro-drawing talents were their only salvation. Staring at his companion, the tactician declared a master strategy. Pleading for answers, Lion demanded the strategy immediately. To his absolute horror, Arudo frantically ordered his vanguard to take the beast's devastating attack head-on. The bewildered warrior froze, entirely unable to process this insane demand. Despite his undying body, stepping into certain destruction was pure madness. Swearing on his life, Arudo promised his magical suppression would cripple the Titan, desperately begging for his comrade's absolute faith. Cornered by fate, the immortal warrior surrendered to the gamble. What an utterly merciless master, the immortal grumbled, planting his feet firmly to intercept the impending apocalypse. Arudo unleashed a disruptive spell, pushing back the nightmare together. Instantly, he signaled his mage to strike. Scanning her colossal target, she pinpointed the vulnerable scales along its underbelly. She blasted that fatal blind spot, forcing an agonizing, deafening roar from the Titan. Recognizing her victory, she wasted zero time. With supreme focus, she summoned the devastating power of a glacial star, but before her next casting, a massive tail strike blasted her defenses. She plummeted into the earth, lying completely lifeless. Absolute terror gripped the two men as they watched their comrade fall. Yet, in the exact second she was violently smashed down by the beast, a miraculous glow erupted from her necklace. The legendary artifact triggered its absolute death-nullifying protection. Hurtling toward her doom, a mysterious force from the charm violently yanked her trajectory. The gears shattered the lethal momentum, sparing her life from the catastrophic crash. Struggling to her feet, a massive shadow loomed over her as the Titan brought its foot down. Her panicked comrades screamed her name, sprinting desperately into the jaw of death. A cataclysmic tremor shook the earth as the Titan crushed the empty ground. The bewildered beast frantically scanned the battlefield, its microscopic brain unable to process her impossible vanishing act. Arudo's clutch maneuver had snatched her from the Reaper's grasp. Propping up their battered mage, the immortal warrior confessed his sheer astonishment at such a brilliant application of earth magic. With a breathless smirk, the tactician revealed it was the ultimate loophole for emergency dodges. Cradling his injured teammate, the vanguard frantically checked her vitals. Finding her stable, he immediately locked eyes with their leader, desperately demanding the recovery elixir. A dark shadow crossed the tactician's face as he revealed their sanctuary was reduced to ashes. Suddenly, his gelatinous familiar wiggled forward, offering a miraculous prize. The strategist's jaw dropped in absolute disbelief. His squishy companion had somehow salvaged the life-saving elixir. Slapping his commander's back in wild triumph, the immortal cheered. They immediately poured the sacred medicine past the mage's lips. Color instantly returned as she painfully repented for her reckless blunder. She fully acknowledged that without her leader's magical artifact, her life would have violently ended. But now, blazing with renewed fury, she prepared to unleash her absolute maximum magical output upon the calamity. Panic flared as her teammates frantically ordered her to retreat. They swore to shoulder the vanguard's hellish burden while she safely concealed herself in the shadows. Fierce spellcaster defiantly locked eyes, refusing to yield. She fiercely argued that supporting the vanguard alone would completely shatter their tactician, leaving zero firepower to execute the beast. Hearing this, the immortal warrior just stared in absolute silence. The brilliant strategist nodded, acknowledging her undeniable battle logic. In a split second, an emergency combat conference was frantically initiated. While they plotted their desperate counterattack, the raging calamity violently stalked the shadows. Stepping straight into the jaws of hell, the immortal fearlessly mocked the towering predator. Calling the beast a brainless giant, he unleashed a deafening war cry, instantly triggering the monster's bloodthirsty charge. His suicidal mission was clear: hold the monster's overwhelming aggro for 60 terrifying seconds while the mastermind constructed a lethal ambush. Smashing a colossal oak to splinters, the vanguard roared that he lacked their mage's agility and couldn't dance around death forever. Yet, his physical fortitude was absolutely legendary. The raging titan instantly incinerated the massive timber hurled into its path, maintaining its apocalyptic sprint toward the undying bait. Sweating under the crushing pressure, the warrior desperately screamed for a tactical update. The mastermind barked that the fatal snare was nearly primed, begging for one final delay. Pushing his absolute limits, the vanguard launched a massive boulder to bait the Leviathan. The arrogant monster evaded, plunging blindly into the tactician's devastating snare. Sensing the absolute checkmate, the warrior exploded forward, delivering an earth-shattering blow upon the chained calamity. Suddenly, Magika screamed over the chaos, asking Lion if the beast was speeding up or charging her with absolute killing intent. Arudo yelled a desperate warning. His binding magic would shatter in exactly 10 seconds. After that, death was certain. Preparing for a massive throw, Lion demanded if Shorty was ready. Magika scoffed, deeply insulted he would even ask such a foolish question. Channeling immense strength, Lion hurled her skyward like a human missile, roaring for her to unleash everything. Unleashing her legendary Twinkling Star and Fist of Dreams, Magika struck hard, but the monster simply countered with blazing Inferno. Plummeting downwards, she yelled a quick apology, realizing the mighty beast reacted completely wrong. However, the mindless terror took the bait. Her flashy barrage successfully tricked the giant reptile into exposing its throat to the sky. With its fatal blind spot wide open, destiny fell entirely upon Lion to strike the ultimate, decisive blow. Trusting his party completely, Lion unleashed his aura. Gripping the sword of courage, he leaped, spectacularly severing the dragon's massive head. The mighty titan crashed down lifelessly, causing the exhausted party to erupt into ecstatic, victorious cheers. Reveling in their flawless teamwork, an adrenaline-fueled Lion faced Arudo, practically begging to claim the legendary Dragon Slayer title. Arudo smiled warmly, validating the lethal strike. Overjoyed, Lion pumped his fist, thrilled to possess such an awesomely heroic nickname. Meanwhile, a stunned Magika could hardly believe Arudo trusted such a crucial finishing strike to Lion. Deeply insulted, Lion bristled at her sharp mockery, demanding if she really wanted to fight right now. Surprisingly, Magika smiled warmly. She frankly admitted his power was incredible today, promising to rely on his overwhelming strength for future life or death battles. Utterly confused, Lion stared back, unable to determine if she offered genuine praise or pure insanity. Watching them bicker, Arudo remained silent. Suddenly, violent vertigo crashed over the entire group, leaving them staggering and intensely disoriented. Gripping her spinning head, Magika groaned, questioning if this extreme vertigo signaled a massive level up. Checking his glowing system interface, a shocked Arudo discovered he skyrocketed 8 entire ranks, hitting level 78. This exponential growth was mind-blowing, considering demonic slaughters barely yielded any experience lately. Overcome with relief, Arudo suddenly hugged his utterly bewildered teammates. He urgently commanded them to stay awake, warning that collapsing now meant becoming beast fodder before tomorrow morning's sunrise. Hastily conjuring a defensive earth barricade, they finally slumped downward, while Arudo tasked Ru with overnight guard duty. The fiercely loyal spirit accepted without hesitation, standing vigil beneath an eerily beautiful, silver moonlit sky. Exhaustion claimed them instantly. Come morning, the groggy party awoke to a deeply startling, impossible sight before them. Intense, suffocating heat washed over their bodies while blinding crimson energy pulsed wildly. Arudo blinked, discovering a gargantuan, legendary dragon core blazing nearby. Astonished, Arudo faced his exhausted spirit, asking if he single-handedly hauled this massive treasure. A drained Ru nodded proudly. Showering Ru with gratitude, Arudo marveled at his incredible dedication to extract the core while maintaining perfect watch. Arudo affectionately hugged his summon, bringing immense joy to the loyal spirit. Nearby, an awestruck Magika swore she had never witnessed such terrifyingly pure magical energy. Spellbound by the glowing artifact, a mesmerized lion whispered, asking if that truly was the dragon core. Bathed in its magnificent radiance, they realized this flawless gem alone was absolute proof of their impossible, heaven-defying triumph over the legendary beast. Scanning the mountainous carcass looming beyond their camp, Arudo smirked, knowing this core was merely the beginning of their loot. Unsheathing his razor-sharp blade, Arudo immediately began carving the beast's massive hindquarters, leaving a confused lion demanding an explanation. Arudo firmly stated they absolutely could not abandon such priceless materials. He pointed directly toward its indestructible, glittering scales. Woven into garments, these scales forged legendary armor completely immune to heavy iron swords. Furthermore, those terrifying claws craft deadly weapons slicing through steel like butter. Even its thick hide weaves magical cloaks, nullifying enemy spells. Then, he pointed towards something sparkling. Arudo triumphantly revealed an insanely rare treasure, the dragon's massive eyeball. Its value was astronomically high. The party gasped in pure shock as Arudo proudly hoisted the gigantic, glowing eye upward. Eyes burning with overwhelming excitement, Arudo then announced uncovering the ultimate, legendary prize, the dragon heart. Overwhelmed by the sheer value, Lion instantly passed out. A shocked Magika grabbed Arudo's collar, frantically attempting to wake their fainted warrior. Staring intensely at Arudo, Magika urgently asked about the dragon heart's true purpose. Arudo explained that aging it for 3 long years miraculously produces a divine elixir of resurrection. Magika remembered ancient legends of such miracles, shocked it required dragon hearts. Suddenly reviving, Lion chimed in that tragically, this holy magic only works on human souls. After masterfully butchering the colossal beast, Arudo calculated their astronomical haul easily covered their new guild gear. He smiled, realizing financial ruin was absolutely impossible for a very long time. Arudo strictly warned Magika against reckless spending. She immediately nodded in agreement. Aruto stared at the mountain of rare loot, frustrated he couldn't carry it all. Just then, a newly awakened lion casually joked about needing a magical inventory skill. Hearing the word inventory left Arudo completely frozen in pure shock. Stumbling over his words, Lion compared it to stashing gear inside an invisible dimension, exactly like the overpowered mechanics from a fantasy video game. Lion locked eyes with his friend, screaming in absolute disbelief. What kind of trick was this? Holding infinite cargo was completely beyond the realm of human limits. Since his backpack was completely shredded, Arudo mentally calculated they could only haul the absolute minimum right now and come back for the remaining treasures later. The little slime suddenly nudged him, making a confused Aruto ask what was wrong. Creature proudly spat out his missing pouch, and the stunning truth hit Aruto about how Ru possessed such bizarre spatial magic. A wild idea sparked in Aruto's mind. Could little Ru swallow the massive dragon stone too? Doubting it would work, he asked the creature to devour the gigantic horde. Instead of struggling, Ru casually unhinged its jaw and inhaled every single treasure in a blinding flash, leaving the entire party completely speechless. Gripping the slime, Lion shouted that inventory magic was impossible. Hearing this, Aruto dramatically broke down in tears, realizing his agonizing hours of sorting loot were completely useless. While his companions comforted the weeping boy, a mysterious figure silently watched them from the shadows. The hidden girl smiled, amazed that a mere trio, especially that mysterious boy, had utterly annihilated a terrifying dragon. The divine prophecies were actually true after all. Thrilled by the unfolding fate, she waited for their next move. Bursting through the guild doors, Aruto proudly declared their impossible dragon hunting mission was a complete success. Lion confidently invited the guild staff to inspect their legendary monster drops. The arrogant appraiser scoffed, claiming that while the loot looked authentic, anyone could easily purchase these beast parts from an underground black market auction. Fully rejecting their claim, the staff refused to buy the materials or issue the massive bounty, aggressively ordering the furious teenagers to leave empty-handed. Furious, Lion snapped that these hard-earned spoils were never intended for petty resale. Watching quietly, Aruto grimly accepted that their physical evidence simply wasn't enough. He silently cursed the cruel chains of fate, knowing how mercilessly the heavens bound every soul to a pre-written destiny that was almost impossible to shatter. He knew this unfair bias was the world's natural penalty for anyone daring enough to challenge their preordained destiny. It functioned exactly like the world's twisted magic. Touching Lion's shoulder, Aruto softly apologized and admitted they had to retreat for now. Shocked, Lion gritted his teeth, unable to accept surrender after they genuinely slaughtered that beast. But the stubborn guild refused. Aruto whispered that their true mission was just securing money for their school uniforms. They would just find an underground buyer for the beast parts instead. Hearing this tactical shift, Lion slowly nodded in reluctant agreement. However, his warrior pride still burned at the unfair rejection. Suddenly, an arrogant voice echoed across the room, sharply scolding the boys for their shouting. Aruto raised his head, pure terror striking his core the exact second he recognized the mysterious speaker. The elegant girl smirked, teasing that while the guild loved its flashy choral decor, their loud screaming was ridiculously dramatic. Did they really not notice? Demanding to know who she was, they glared at the stranger. She bowed gracefully, declaring herself as Citri Justice, the absolute future master of the illustrious Justice Duchy. Scowling, Lion bluntly admitted he didn't understand her noble nonsense. He fiercely warned the haughty noble to mind her own business. Smirking, Citri quickly fired back that she was simply answering their rude demand for her identity. Her eyes narrowed as she mocked them as uncultured barbarian mercenaries. Lion's aura flared with blazing fury, desperately fighting his rising temper while aggressively demanding she repeat that insult. Sensing disaster, Aruto quickly urged him to relax. Aruto nervously analyzed the girl, her terrifying name echoing in his mind. She was a ruthless inquisitor for the Council of Absolute Truth, serving as one of Euphonia's 12 legendary generals. What was this dangerous VIP doing here? Aruto panicked. Inspecting the rejected loot, Citri lifted a glowing vial, instantly recognizing it as incredibly fresh beast spinal fluid. She smirked, declaring this rare substance proved the beast was slaughtered mere days ago, completely shattering the guild's pathetic resale theory. Scolding the staff for refusing the purchase, her overwhelming authority forced the terrified guild officials to instantly agree to her absolute demands. Gliding toward Aruto, the terrifying girl leaned in dangerously close, her eyes gleaming as she praised his impossible feat of becoming a teenage dragon slayer. Whispering that she eagerly awaited his future hidden miracles, she smirked. Drenched in cold sweat, a paralyzed Aruto could only stare back in absolute terror. Stepping outside, an ecstatic Lion hugged his massive reward of 150 gold coins, screaming that he had never seen such unimaginable wealth. Magika quickly shattered his dreams, strictly warning him against reckless spending. Trailing behind, Aruto drowned in paranoia, obsessively wondering why Citri targeted him instead of his flashy companions. Did she uncover his true motives? He had spent over 10 agonizing years calculating the ultimate master plan to successfully rescue Hannah. His current safe house was crucial to the operation. Debating if he should rewrite his strategy due to this anomaly, his steely resolve quickly solidified he wouldn't change a single thing. Retreating now would only expose his fatal weakness to the enemy. He had no choice but to push forward with his master plan. Everything was falling perfectly into place, or so Aruto desperately tried to convince himself. Meanwhile, in the courtyard, Citri moved like lightning, effortlessly destroying her sparring partner. A breathless servant rushed over to halt the match. Noticing her blazing energy, he nervously asked if some major event had shaken the capital. With a dangerous smirk, she declared she had finally hunted down her target, proving that the heavens' prophecies were absolute. Royal decree to annihilate dragons had paid off. The Empire was desperate to slaughter those mythical beasts at any cost. For a lone warrior to achieve such a legendary feat was considered completely impossible. Yet, if a warrior defied divine destiny and actually slaughtered a dragon, that anomaly would drag the entire world into an apocalyptic nightmare. Despite lacking concrete proof, her terrifying intuition refused to let this anomaly escape. Recalling her encounter with Aruto, she vividly remembered the terrifying, untamed battle aura burning deep within his eyes. In her mind, only a warrior walking a path of absolute conviction could radiate such an overwhelming, heaven-defying presence. Snapping back to reality, she casually parried a lethal strike, commanding Lord Formus to observe closely as she prepared to unmask Aruto's hidden depths. Beneath the blazing sun, Aruto, Magika, and Lion entered the academy, bracing themselves for the fateful class ranking reveals. Scanning the massive bulletin board, Lion found his name assigned to Class C. Seeing the written scores listed beside them, he grew furious that raw talent was being ignored. If academic grades actually mattered, how on earth was he dumped into the second worst tier? Magika brutally mocked him, assuming Aruto's written exam scores were an absolute catastrophe. Deflecting the insult, Aruto asked about her results. Pushing up her glasses, Magika proudly declared her elite status as a Class A scholarship prodigy. Lion stood completely paralyzed by shock, while Aruto offered his sincere congratulations. Confused, Magika turned back, assuming Aruto had surely claimed a top spot alongside her. But Aruto calmly revealed his rock-bottom Class D ranking, leaving his friends completely stunned. Dropping dramatically to his knees, Lion howled in sheer agony, devastated that his hard-working rival had ranked even lower than himself. Through exaggerated tears, he accused his friend of foolishly bubbling his exam answers on the wrong lines. Annoyed by the dramatic display, Magika smacked the wailing boy, sharply scolding him for being an absolute fool. Unbothered, Aruto explained the cruel reality of academy politics. As a commoner born into poverty, reaching anything above Class D was simply impossible, regardless of actual merit. Furthermore, the young man confessed that ordinary academy life meant absolutely nothing to him, rendering his rank completely irrelevant. He was perfectly fine. However, his unnerving calmness only left his friends absolutely speechless. Brushing off the tension, the trio exchanged their farewells in the hallway, splitting up to conquer their newly assigned battlegrounds. Silently praying for his friend's success, Aruto marched toward his own classroom, fully aware that a storm of ridiculous trouble was waiting inside. Relying on his past life memories, he knew a bucket of water would instantly drop the second he turned the doorknob, disguised as a classmate's supposed magic training. The arrogant culprit would then fake an apology, swearing it was just an accident. He would demand forgiveness while silently sneering at Aruto, treating him like absolute peasant trash. Having already endured the endless torment noble brats inflicted on commoners, the seasoned regressor saw right through this pathetic trap. Dodging the trap flawlessly, Aruto sarcastically praised the boy's magical efforts. Meanwhile, the whispering crowd stared in absolute shock, wondering how the commoner stayed perfectly dry. Stepping up to cover for his comrade, a second noble sneered that his friend simply lacked proper mana control. Deciding to escalate the bullying, he launched his own vicious spell. Yet, Aruto casually neutralized the magical assault, remaining completely untouched. The arrogant attacker's jaw dropped, utterly bewildered by how a mere commoner had effortlessly shattered his magic. Taking his seat and unpacking his bag, Aruto smirked inwardly. In his previous timeline, such effortless reflection would have been hailed as legendary sorcery. Blind to his monstrous strength, the baffled bullies assumed the peasant secretly wore defensive artifacts. Assuming he had stolen such a priceless treasure, the nobles eagerly decided to violently confiscate it. Summoning a blazing inferno, the smirking student yelled that his deadly flames wouldn't be a problem if the commoner truly had protective gear. Staring down his pathetic attackers, Aruto realized he was being branded a common criminal. He internally sighed, wondering if flexing his aura so publicly was a massive mistake. Regardless, their magic was weaker than a gentle breeze. Suddenly, an innocent girl walked through the doorway just as the explosive fireball flew forward. Moving like lightning, Aruto intercepted the blazing projectile before it could incinerate her. His heaven-defying speed paralyzed the noble, leaving the room frozen as Aruto sharply spoke up. Playing with lethal magic indoors is beyond stupid. What if you actually killed an innocent bystander? Glaring dangerously, he demanded better control. The trembling bully gasped, unable to process the supposed peasant's monstrous speed. Blinking at the smoldering chaos, the rescued girl broke the heavy silence, innocently asking what was happening. Fear gripped Aruto's heart. This was the fated encounter he had dreaded. Turning around, his eyes locked onto Hana's familiar silhouette. Closing the distance, Aruto forced a calm smile, claiming someone was merely practicing magic. He assured her there was no danger. Yet, behind his reassuring words, hot tears threatened to spill, knowing the devastating tragedy that awaited them both. He absolutely could not rekindle their romance. After all, his own hourglass had merely 5 years left. If they fell in love again, fate would force him to break her heart anew. Remaining strangers was better than inflicting that torture, especially since Hana's doomed fate was only 4 months away. Escaping the room, he desperately clung to his fragile lie. In his heart, he swore an unbreakable oath to absolutely protect her. For Hana Colonel, just seeing him felt like stopping time. Even attending this prestigious academy was an absolute miracle for her. The Colonel bloodline commanded immense respect within the Euphonia Kingdom. As their supposed heir, the weight of crushing expectations rested upon her. Her family hired an elite, world-class instructor. Tragically, she possessed absolutely zero magical aptitude. The renowned teacher coldly informed her parents that he had never witnessed such a pathetic lack of talent. Hidden behind heavy doors, young Hana heard every soul-crushing word. He callously explained that innate talent dictated one's entire future. Her fundamental potential was stuck at an abysmal level 4. With such a miserable rank, establishing a martial foundation or achieving any greatness was utterly impossible. Gaining reluctance, he delivered the brutal truth. Their precious daughter was entirely worthless. 10 agonizing years dragged by. True to that dark prophecy, Hana met only bitter failure. Despite shedding blood and tears, she remained stagnant. Eventually, everyone discarded her, including her deeply disappointed father. Yet, her unyielding spirit pushed her forward. Through shadowy political strings, she forced her way into this elite academy. The institution desperately hid her existence, terrified that her glaring weakness would completely shatter the legendary colonel reputation. Anna lived like a ghost. She barely breathed, swallowed every word, and completely erased her presence to survive in the suffocating shadows. By becoming entirely invisible, she shielded herself from cruel mockery, accepting a lifetime of total, devastating isolation. But walking into this very room, the gears of her destiny violently shifted. She suddenly recalled a distant memory of her mother whispering about true love. Her mother had promised that heaven's will would instantly reveal her fated partner, binding their souls together from the very first glance. The second her gaze met Aruto's, her racing heart recognized her ultimate destiny. Meanwhile, Aruto practiced his blade work. The instructor barked orders, demanding everyone fight as if facing bloodthirsty demonic beasts. Master roared, warning them that sloppy, half-hearted strikes would only lead to a swift death. He threatened to expel any weaklings. However, beneath that fierce intimidation, it was merely a motivational bluff. As Aruto tested his short blade, deadly killing intent flared. The teacher ambushed him, forcing Aruto into a flawless, split-second evasion. Commanding the blade, the aggressive instructor claimed a lowly novice lacked the aura to handle such lethal steel. Aruto held an impossibly rare artifact, a divine, razor-sharp dagger forged directly from an ancient dragon's fang. The teacher demanded its origin story. Aruto silently remembered slaughtering a massive dragon to craft it, but kept his mouth shut to avoid sounding utterly insane. The smug instructor insisted that heavily relying on overpowered gear would absolutely shatter any warrior's potential growth. Greed flashing in his eyes, the teacher shamelessly decided to confiscate the priceless treasure until Aruto leveled up. He barked for immediate surrender. Whispers erupted. Against Levante, an elite-class adventurer, the students firmly believed Aruto was already dead meat. Aruto remained perfectly still, coldly anticipating the impending clash. Launching a second brutal strike, the arrogant master mocked Aruto's sluggish speed, furious that the boy still defiantly clutched the blade. Weaving past deadly strikes, Aruto's fighting spirit burned intensely. He instantly acknowledged his opponent's terrifying, high-tier aura. Shock rippled through the instructor's mind. How could a filthy commoner effortlessly slip through his elite, high-speed assault? Dismissing it as dumb luck, he challenged the boy to a deadly game of tag. Aruto's eyes narrowed thoughtfully. The arrogant master laid down the rules, survived without taking a single hit until class ended, and the treasure was his. Aruto sensed the man's unnatural, blazing greed for the weapon. Levante clearly intended to ruthlessly crush him. Cracking his knuckles, the tyrant declared retreating meant instant failure. He planned to show absolutely zero mercy to a lowly peasant. The survival game commenced. Roaring with explosive power, Levante charged, only to strike empty air as Aruto vanished. The massive man lunged with terrifying velocity. However, compared to Magika's monstrous presence, this felt like child's play. Frustration boiled within the master. He watched in utter disbelief as the boy became untouchable, desperately blaming it on sheer luck. Without warning, Levante unleashed a vicious gale. The arrogant instructor thought he had cornered Aruto completely, but the devastating blast only shattered the wall. Levante froze in shock. His target had completely vanished. Reappearing right behind his opponent, Aruto felt a cold sweat. That was far too close for comfort. This instructor was out for blood, spamming high-tier spells. The clueless crowd roared, begging for absolute destruction. Only Hannah stood dead silent. Her piercing eyes tracked Aruto, waiting for his grand counterattack. Dodging barrage after barrage, Aruto questioned the sheer malice radiating from the supposedly noble teacher. Pushed to the brink, Aruto activated his spatial shortening skill. He instantly teleported to a towering oak. He had barely mastered this high-speed footwork, a divine art granting him near instantaneous short-range movement. Fury twisted Levante's face. How was this pathetic trash dodging everything? The humiliation of defeat loomed closer. Aruto lightly touched down on a sturdy branch above. The instructor sneered, mocking his escape before pointing at Aruto's shredded uniform. The speed was absolutely terrifying. Aruto hadn't even felt the fabric tear. Aruto smirked at the damage. He had tracked every single strike perfectly. He already held the absolute advantage. That arrogant instructor hadn't landed a single physical blow. It was invisible wind magic. Levante gritted his teeth, knowing the brilliant student had completely exposed his dirty trick. Suddenly, a corrupt lackey in the crowd lied, claiming physical contact was made. The mob blindly agreed. Hannah glared at the liars. Mere students could never track that godlike speed. The trap was closing in on Aruto. Normal evasion tactics were useless now. Levante smugly extended his palm, demanding the legendary dragon fang as his prize. Out of nowhere, a sharp voice pierced the tension. Someone dared to call out the corrupt instructor's bluff. It was Magika. She boldly announced she saw through the entire facade. Aruto dropped down, completely shocked by her sudden appearance. Brushing it off as a coincidence, Magika turned her piercing gaze to Levante. Was this cowardly thug really an educator? Her terrifying aura washed over the instructor. Cold sweat dripped down Levante's face as he recognized her horrifying true identity. She was an absolute national disaster-level threat. Terrified of provoking a monster, the cowardly teacher immediately backed down. Forcing her divine demonic eyes, Levante locked back onto his prey. He threatened Aruto, warning that defeat would now carry fatal consequences. With a wicked sneer, the corrupt teacher reset the deathmatch. A massive hurricane blade erupted. Levante arrogantly flaunted the terrifying power of an A-level adventurer. This was a supreme magical martial art. He concentrated pure violent mana into his bare hands, forging invisible deadly weapons. He dared the weakling to survive this nightmare. In a flash, Levante lunged, absolutely certain he had sealed Aruto's fate. A storm of razor-sharp projectiles completely surrounded the arena. In Levante's twisted mind, Aruto was nothing but disposable trash. Training accident was the perfect cover for murder. Unleashing lethal force, he commanded the Tempest to rip the boy apart. Aruto's eyes flashed with absolute focus. The air itself had become an apocalyptic meat grinder. Getting grazed meant instant death. Moving like a phantom, Aruto danced flawlessly through the deadly hurricane barrage. Levante's jaw dropped in sheer horror. How could a pathetic first-level novice survive this? An unsettling dread consumed him. Was this boy shattering the very laws of power rankings? Refusing to accept reality, Levante blamed his own temporary fatigue. Desperation clouded the corrupt teacher's mind. Driven by pure frantic ego, he shamelessly unsheathed actual cold steel. His pride as an elite instructor could not handle this humiliation. Gripping the deadly blade, he launched a suicidal charge. Aruto gritted his teeth as lethal steel flashed before him. The timer was ticking down, and survival felt hopelessly impossible. One final dodge meant absolute victory, but the jealous crowd began whispering, convinced the rookie was using dirty tricks. Screaming for blood, the cowardly bullies ambushed him from behind. They viciously pinned Aruto's legs to the ground. The treacherous students cheered, serving their own classmate up on a silver platter. Paralyzed and completely defenseless, Aruto watched the executioner approach. While the classroom mocked him, Hannah felt a terrifying wave of dread. Was an educator truly going to commit murder? Levante smiled like a demon, ready to slaughter this pathetic first-level insect. His fragile ego demanded an absolute bloodbath. The execution blade plummeted straight for Aruto's neck. Death was literally an inch away. But in that final microsecond, Aruto unleashed his overpowered system hack. The steel blade violently ripped itself from Levante's grip. The corrupt teacher stared at his empty hands in pure, absolute shock. Triggering his spatial leap one last time, Aruto vanished in a flash. He teleported entirely, dragging the dumbfounded bullies right along with him. Unleashing his ultimate skills, grave and argalization, Aruto completely crushed the instructor's defenses. He branded the corrupt instructor as pathetic, blinded by sheer arrogance, before letting the ball crash down right beside him. The final seconds bled away as the bell echoed through the arena. Aruto stood victorious. Clinging to his legs, the bewildered students stared in pure shock. Aruto calmly declared the class finished, asking them to finally let go. Trembling in awe, the paralyzed classmates slowly released their desperate grip. Later, the academy erupted in whispers, blindly praising instructor Levante's flashy moves while weeping over their own lack of talent. They hopelessly dreamed of reaching his level, completely ignoring Aruto, who quietly trailed behind them. Realizing his presence was already forgotten, he questioned this world's twisted logic. Suddenly, Magika charged forward, playfully striking his back. Completely baffled, he listened as she scolded his terrible awareness, teasing him for falling for such a simple sneak attack. Her punishment, mandatory after-school training. Sighing heavily, Aruto confessed he actually planned to level up his blacksmithing mastery that evening. He casually denied losing his blade, telling her to forget it, but she stubbornly refused. Watching from the shadows, Hannah remained utterly silent. As twilight fell, she ignited her grueling solo practice. Yet, images of Aruto's overwhelming power haunted her swings. Why was his true strength completely ignored? The instructor was strong, but was she the only one seeing Aruto's absolute superiority? While everyone was blind, she saw him effortlessly dodging strikes with his eyes closed. It defied all logic. How could a mere level 1 possess such godlike reflexes? Despite being level 4, she felt entirely inadequate, cursed by her lack of innate talent. Violently shaking her head, she banished the despairing thoughts. Raw genius couldn't be beaten by mere sweat. Yet, Aruto must have endured hellish training to reach that peak. Gripping her hilt until her knuckles turned white, she vowed that extreme dedication could still forge her into a warrior. Suddenly, the heavy blade slipped from her grasp as agonizing pain shot through her. Staring at her bruised, battered palms, hot tears threatened to fall. But her resolve burned brighter. she would conquer her weakness alone. Just then, Arudo stepped into the dojo, locking eyes with her. Panicking slightly, he immediately apologized, claiming he missed the signs and assumed the training grounds were completely empty. Desperate, Hana called out, begging him to stay for a brief conversation. He pretended not to hear, staring blankly at the exit as her pleas echoed. Collapsing to the floor, she formally introduced herself as Hana Colonel, praised his breathtaking combat prowess, knowing no normal cadet could ever humiliate Instructor Levante. She begged to know the secret behind his strength. Frozen at the doorway, his heart waged a bitter war against the 5-year countdown. Becoming attached now would only shatter her soul later, he reasoned, choosing instead to remain a silent guardian in the shadows. Keeping his back turned, he coldly credited his power to agonizing repetition. Suddenly, she lunged forward, gripping his hand. A heavy silence consumed them. Snatching her fingers back, she spun around, frantically apologizing for her bold and sudden touch. Deep regret washed over her flushed face. Meanwhile, Arudo watched her, a warm, nostalgic smile breaking through. She was a perfect mirror of his most cherished past memories. Shattering the illusion, Hana pleaded for him to listen. With a trembling voice, she asked the impossible, would he ever consider becoming her personal training partner? Despite bleeding for her dreams, she remained stuck in absolute mediocrity. Even under elite instructors, her growth remained completely stagnant, forever trailing in everyone else's dust. Looking into his eyes, she confessed a desperate hope. If he became her master, destiny might finally smile upon her. She bowed, instantly regretting her boldness. He absorbed every trembling word as her anxiety skyrocketed. Then, his gaze dropped to her bloodied, blistered palms, and a sharp ache pierced his hardened heart. The chance to build a true bond was fading rapidly. His mind spiraled, completely torn between duty and hidden desire. But looking into those fiercely determined eyes, he simply couldn't reject the woman who had meant absolutely everything to him in his previous life. Arudo softly promised that if her conviction was absolute, he would offer his entire strength to guide her. A blinding smile lit her face as she offered endless gratitude. Sealing their pact, she vowed to shatter her limits. Arudo grinned back, softly murmuring, "This is fate. We will conquer this together." Suddenly, intruding voices cheered that they witnessed the whole scene. Hana gasped, completely caught off guard. Lion burst in, boldly declaring that mutual acquaintances equal instant friendship. With a shy girl hiding behind him, he launched Operation 100 Friends. Thrusting his hand forward, he offered Hana an overwhelmingly bright, welcoming smile. Introducing himself as Lion, he casually asked to drop the formalities. A flustered Hana shyly nodded. Glaring at the intruder, Arudo bitterly muttered about this ridiculous friendship logic. "What absolute nonsense. We aren't even close," he barked. Lion acted dramatically heartbroken, forcing a sighing Arudo to quickly diffuse the chaotic situation. Stepping forward, the mysterious girl revealed her full name as Magika Estate Terror, though she playfully insisted on just Magika. Grasping her hand, Hana caught that noble-sounding title, wondering aloud if royal blood flowed through her veins. A bittersweet smile crossed her face. She confessed her squirrel lineage was indeed fallen nobility, stripped of their ancient glory. Their ancestral might had faded into history. Both Lion and Arudo absorbed this heavy revelation in absolute silence. Suddenly, Lion shattered the quiet. Outrage flared as he demanded why this aristocratic secret was kept hidden from him. Unbothered, Magika flatly retorted that she simply never found a compelling reason to bring up her past. Fury ignited within Lion. He screamed that his exceptional heroic gifts were completely overshadowed by her legendary birthright. Glaring down at her, he scoffed at how such a tiny creature could harbor sovereign majesty. Instantly, their explosive rivalry reignited. Watching the chaos unfold, a concerned Hana glanced toward Arudo, whispering if they should break up the fiery clash. With a calm smirk, Arudo dismissed her worries, confident that Lion's monstrous endurance could handle the heat. From a weakling crushed by lowly fiends, Lion had forged himself into Magika's true rival. Arudo saw that same boundless potential within Hana. Her destined awakening was inevitable. Days later, outside Euphonia's borders, the entire party marched into the untamed wilderness for a brutal trial. Arudo paired the rookie with her loyal slime companion, plunging them straight into grueling cooperative survival drills. Watching closely, Arudo would step in during critical moments, checking her condition while she bravely pushed past her limits. A question about her current stats, Hana shamefully admitted reaching level 4, but a cursed lack of innate talent locked all her skills at rank 1. Both warriors froze in stunned disbelief. Convinced this tragic confession was merely a twisted joke, a completely talentless existence, tears of frustration welled in Lion's eyes as a devastated Hana bowed her head, prompting Arudo to fiercely silence him. But shattering all expectations, Lion roared with absolute excitement, leaving the entire group utterly paralyzed. He passionately argued that system blessings merely accelerate growth. They never bind a warrior's absolute destiny. Escaping the system's rigid classes means ultimate freedom. Without destined paths, she could carve her own legendary future. Isn't that absolute brilliance? Realization struck Aruto like a lightning bolt. This revolutionary perspective on being talentless completely shattered Hana's lifelong despair. Staring in awe, Aruto praised the profound wisdom, genuinely dumbfounded that such genius poured from their local hothead. Magika bluntly admitted she always assumed he was entirely brainless. As all eyes locked onto him, a deeply offended lion demanded an explanation for their disrespect. Eventually reaching a tranquil lake, the real trial approached. A nervous Hana innocently offered to practice striking the surrounding timber instead of facing danger. But Aruto shattered that naive illusion, declaring this crucible would feature genuine, life-or-death combat. He was about to clash with savage beasts. Pure dread washed over Hana's face, her trembling voice insisting this suicidal task was impossible. Taking a life was beyond her. Panic surging, she desperately reminded him of her pitiful rank 1 combat capabilities. 3 intense, unyielding gazes locked onto the trembling girl as she begged for mercy, lacking any trace of survival instinct. Digging into his inventory, Aruto offered a comforting, unshakable vow. He swore on his life that no shadow would ever harm her. Instantly, a bloodthirsty goblin horde ambushed their flank. Lion screamed that throwing a rookie into this nightmare was absolute madness. Even Magika condemned the sheer magnitude of this green-skinned swarm. Unfazed, the master tactician revealed his hidden motive. Gathering his vanguard, he murmured a high-stakes strategy into the wind. Eyes widening in lethal synchronization, Lion praised the sheer brilliance of their leader's gamble. Combat auras erupting, the duo braced for carnage. Thrusting a heavy blade into Hana's trembling hands, Aruto signaled the brutal trial's commencement. Gripping the cold hilt, the terrified girl confessed her absolute unreadiness. Placing absolute faith in his squad, the vanguard launched their explosive counterattack. Magika gracefully danced through the lethal flurry of goblin blades. Halting into the sky, she assessed the swarm, deciding that single-target execution was far beneath her sovereign dignity. Mana erupted as she unleashed a devastating area of effect blast, instantly vaporizing the low-tier trash. This was her signature, overwhelming annihilation tactic. Across the battlefield, Aruto ignited a blinding artifact, plunging headfirst into the slaughter. The majestic display of pure dominance left Hana absolutely spellbound. Suddenly, a hidden monster erupted from the thicket. Staring down its jagged blade, her horrifying vulnerability crashed down upon her. Moving at supersonic speed, Aruto intercepted the fatal strike. Obliterating the vile beast, the ultimate protector anxiously scanned his fragile ward for any scratches. Nodding shakily, she confirmed her safety. In that exact heartbeat, Aruto sensed the ultimate crucible had finally arrived. A desperate roar echoed as a sea of green monsters completely buried Lion, the careless warrior screaming his final regrets. Witnessing her comrade drowning beneath the vicious swarm, absolute horror gripped Hana. She shrieked for Aruto to execute an emergency rescue. Swatting away a savage attacker, Aruto coldly claimed he was occupied, ordering the terrified rookie to step up and save him herself. She shrieked, violently denying the suicidal mission, but her unwavering mentor swore total victory was already within her grasp. The beast's bloodthirsty gaze locked entirely onto Lion. A perfect blind spot opened up for Hana, but paralyzing hesitation chained her. Aruto, watching closely, knew everything was unfolding perfectly. This master plan relied entirely on Lion's absurd traits, unyielding strength, elite baiting skills, and absolute immortality. As an unkillable meat shield, Lion would draw the enemy's endless fury. This left Hana completely free to execute the fatal strikes. Together with Magika, she could systematically obliterate the remaining horde. But one fatal variable remained. Did Hana have the warrior's spirit to strike? She gripped her blade, knuckles white, drowning in pure terror. But if she backed down, who would save them? Igniting her training, she lunged at the beast's blind spot, drawing first blood. Hot tears streamed down her cheeks. Magika noted the flesh wound was superficial, but the psychological scars fracturing Hana's soul were far deeper. Aruto quietly observed her, reading her absolute dread. Trauma haunted her. Having watched a comrade fall, she carried the crushing guilt of freezing up. Her own powerlessness felt completely suffocating. Suddenly, Aruto's commanding voice cut through the battlefield chaos. "You can do this," he declared. That unwavering faith struck her like lightning. Her grip tightened, fear morphing into an ironclad resolve to shatter her limits. With his commanding presence anchoring her spirit, she knew she could forge her own blazing courage. She rocketed toward the monsters. Her blade danced with awakened power as she mentally shattered the chains of her pathetic past. Burning with ambition, she unleashed a relentless assault. A cowardly archer aimed for her back, but Magika instantly blocked the lethal shot. "Know your place," Magika sneered, reflecting the deadly projectile back with devastating magical force. Hana became a whirlwind of steel, cleaving through one beast, then two. An intoxicating wave of battle triumph flooded her veins. As her true potential awakened, a sudden wave of extreme vertigo struck her. Aruto caught her collapsing frame, his steady voice etched with genuine worry. She weakly apologized to her leader, blaming the sudden head rush. Aruto smiled knowingly. It was the shockwave of a level up. Pure euphoria ignited Hana's soul as the system confirmed her newfound strength. The dam finally broke. Sobbing onto Aruto's shoulder, she released 15 agonizing years of waiting for this very miracle. A muffled groan ruined the emotional climax. Lion bitterly complained from beneath a massive, suffocating mountain of goblin corpses. Aruto awkwardly confessed he had entirely forgotten their immortal bait. Hana just stared, utterly baffled by Lion's bizarre composure. Covered in blood and pinned beneath monsters, Lion smugly boasted his unbreakable bravery, claiming these trash-tier mobs meant nothing. The mastermind confessed the truth. This trial was engineered to forge Hana's courage. The realization hit her like a thunderbolt. Flustered, she stepped back from his embrace. Aruto gently suggested they set up camp until her racing heart settled, but her eyes burned with new fire. She was ready. Aruto offered a proud, approving smile. First, he summoned his familiar, Rue the Slime, to fetch a specific weapon. Aruto presented the majestic blade to Hana, forged entirely from unyielding dragon bone. He revealed its legendary origins. He had meticulously crafted this dragon bone masterpiece perfectly tailored to her unique blacksmithing affinity. Gripping the legendary hilt, she was utterly mesmerized by its divine, breathtaking craftsmanship. Suddenly, bloodthirsty reinforcements lunged at her back. Drawing the mythic blade, she unleashed absolute carnage, slaying them effortlessly. She stared at the glowing steel in pure disbelief. How could a casual flick of her wrist generate such catastrophic destructive power? I am completely unworthy of this god-tier weapon, she stammered in shock. Aruto pointed at the shimmering blade. A masterwork weapon guides its master, he philosophized. This blade's sole destiny is to awaken your true potential. Seeing the warrior within, he passionately urged Hana to trust her own blooming strength. Gripping the hilt, his words forged her absolute resolve. Magika and Lion simply watched, wearing proud, silent smiles. Aruto declared the power-leveling session had just begun. They would methodically escalate the monstrous waves, acting as safety nets while she grinded for experience. Seconds later, Hana threw herself back into the bloody fray. Once the final beast collapsed into dust, Aruto rushed to his triumphant vanguard. He praised her flawless execution, checking for any hidden injuries. Curious about her power-up, he asked for her stats. Opening the system interface, Hana eagerly let him look. Aruto's eyes widened in sheer disbelief. She had skyrocketed to level 31, but more shockingly, her dormant unique talent had awakened, the Hero's Seed. Dumbfounded by the legendary Hero's Seed, Aruto approached his vanguard, quickly demanding if Lion knew anything about this mythical trait. Lion just blinked in confusion, asking if the omniscient leader himself had ever witnessed a talent so profoundly rare. Eavesdropping from the shadows, Magika froze, hearing about the Hero's Seed. The puzzle clicked. Hana was the prophesied savior she desperately sought. In this realm, 6 divine entities ruled. Largo, the sovereign of war, Detonic, the mother of life, and Zamatis, the divine lord of craft. Ice commanded souls and destiny. Meanwhile, Formus ruled justice, reigning as the Squirrel tribe's supreme deity. From Amano Aloha, sovereign of nature, came a divine prophecy birthing Princess Magika into this realm. Her fate was absolute. Beside the chosen hero, she would completely reshape this world. Magika's eternal mission was hunting down this legendary savior to become their blade. After 7 long years of standing by Aruto, her fated hero finally stood before her. Hana's dormant potential was no accident. The sinister god Fortimus had shackled her true power. The zealous cult of Formus, boasting the realm's largest congregation, commanded terrifying worldly influence. Euphonia Kingdom was merely his puppet state. Cloaked in false justice, Fortimus ruthlessly slaughtered any soul daring to oppose his divine will. Hana's world-shattering abilities were forcefully sealed away, perceived as a lethal threat to the god's absolute tyranny. Watching Hana, Magika realized Aruto had shattered that very seal. Trusting Aruto was undeniably correct. Their final test was carefully awakening Hana's slumbering, legendary potential. Suddenly, Aruto's voice broke her trance. He asked for her thoughts, catching the princess deeply lost in her own mind. Brushing it off, Magika kept quiet. Exposing the heavy truth of Hana's heroic destiny right now would only crush her spirit entirely. Timing wasn't right yet. Hana suddenly turned, sheepishly suggesting they head back as the morning sun breached the horizon. Her overprotective butler would definitely be panicking. Understanding the situation perfectly, Aruto nodded in agreement. Hana's dramatic power growth was already sufficient for today. With blushing cheeks, she nervously presented one final request. Aruto braced himself for her words. Visibly flustered, Hana shyly begged him to escort her all the way home. She desperately needed an alibi for this all-nighter. Memories flashed of his past life, visiting her towering estate after intense combat training. Back then, her combat injuries had absolutely infuriated that butler. Facing him together was their only viable option now. Glancing at Magika and Lion, Aruto ordered them ahead to the mercenary guild to liquidate their massive mana stones. Reaching the estate, the breathtaking architecture stunned them. Aruto stared in utter awe, captivated by the mansion's overwhelming, timeless majesty. Amused by his shock, Hana proudly revealed her bloodline. The first Colonel Patriarch was literally a founding father of the entire Euphonia kingdom. Grand double doors swung wide, welcoming them inside. Walking past halls lined with ancestral portraits, Hana shared her prestigious lineage. Every generation yielded historical titans who shaped the nation. When Aruto asked if she'd shoulder that heavy legacy, she nodded with fierce determination. Hence, her previous zero-talent status was a devastating curse. Aruto listened quietly, digesting the gravity. Stepping into a lavish parlor, Hana politely asked him to wait. Promising a quick return, she left Aruto sinking into a plush sofa. The moment Hana vanished upstairs, Aruto calmly commanded the hidden eavesdropper to show himself. Materializing from the shadows like a phantom, the startled butler finally revealed himself, introducing his name as Clean. As the esteemed Colonel Household's head butler, Clean instantly began analyzing the mysterious boy. Confirming the boy's identity as Aruto, the tension spiked. Aruto smirked, realizing this phantom butler's stealthy approach meant a highly classified, private interrogation was beginning. Praising the boy's sharp instincts, Clean completely dropped his pleasantries to cut right to business. Out of 30 available academy students, what was his exact ulterior motive for approaching Hana? Clean demanded the raw truth behind targeting his lady. Aruto fully understood the colonel name stood at the absolute pinnacle of high society. Brushing it off as coincidence wouldn't work, to this elite butler, Aruto was just dirt. So Aruto played it straight, explaining that despite her flawed talent, their souls just seemingly resonated. He calmly confessed they both shared the bitter, rock-bottom feeling of absolute worthlessness. Piercing Aruto with a cold glare, Clean acknowledged their supposedly mirrored, pathetic circumstances. He mockingly noted Aruto's struggles, yet admitted one truth. Lady Hana's recent, radiant smiles were undeniably caused by this commoner's lingering presence. Pouring a steaming cup of tea, the butler offered hollow gratitude before dropping his final, heavy question. What exactly was Aruto's endgame regarding his future relationship with the noble Lady Hana? Setting his teacup down, flashes of his past life surfaced. Aruto smiled warmly, declaring he purely desired to be her absolute best friend. Dead silence choked the room. Suddenly, Clean violently smashed the teacup away, roaring that such a bond was utterly forbidden. You are nothing but lowly peasant trash. In a blinding flash, a lethal blade pressed firmly against Aruto's exposed throat. Steel biting into his skin, the furious butler spat that a commoner befriending royalty was an unforgivable, sickening delusion. Sever your ties immediately, the loyal hound snarled. Never approach Lady Hana again. Aruto watched the servant closely. The man's warm facade had shattered, replaced by a chillingly unnatural and sudden hostility. This vicious glare echoed his previous life, back when Aruto accidentally injured Hana, igniting Klein's catastrophic, blazing fury. An invisible string seemed to puppeteer the butler's wrath toward Hana. It was a dark scheme, designed to drag Aruto back into the exact same devastating nightmare of his doomed past. This was the curse of Formus's toxic magic. Remaining quiet now meant letting history mercilessly repeat its tragic slaughter. He refused this fate. Springing to his feet, Aruto fiercely confronted the servant, demanding exactly why Hana was being isolated from him. The arrogant butler sneered. A noble lady loses her prestige by mingling with mere commoners, he coldly explained. Especially peasants of your pathetic rank, he spat, criticizing anyone who dared to claim intellectual equality with highborn blood. Yet Aruto firmly believed this sneering servant was the truly disgraceful one. Their grueling training had awakened massive, undeniable power within Hana. She could easily dominate the D-rank tier. What had Klein actually accomplished for her over 15 long years? As the butler furiously objected, Aruto mercilessly hammered him with the cold truth. Hana stagnated at level 1 for years. Klein had only acted as a useless guard, completely failing to nurture her true potential. Isn't that true noble disgrace? Aruto roared, swiftly disarming the shocked servant. He then exposed 5 shadowy assassins hiding nearby using stealth magic. Tossing a handful of stolen blades onto the table, he proudly revealed the very weapons snatched from those hidden guards. You seem to be their strongest fighter, Aruto mocked. But since I effortlessly stripped you all of your hidden fangs, your combat abilities are honestly pathetic. He warned them exactly what would happen if they dared to escalate this violent encounter. Aruto challenged Klein directly, questioning if noble pride would seriously hold him back. Bewildered, the defeated butler questioned Aruto's reckless motives. Suddenly, the heavy doors swung wide open. Hana stepped inside, sweetly apologizing for the delay before offering a royal tour. Noticing Klein, she innocently questioned his sudden appearance. Masking the tension, Aruto smiled, claiming they were just having a friendly chat. The nervous servant quickly agreed, insisting his presence around Lady Hannah was completely normal. Promising they would cross paths again very soon, the humbled servant offered a deep bow. He politely echoed the sentiment, praying to survive their next encounter. The duo finally departed, wandering through the grand palace. Trailing behind Hannah, Arudo pondered his dangerous gamble. Threatening noble staff was technically a severe crime, but absolute terror was necessary. Memories of his doomed past flooded back. That monstrous Sagan had ambushed them without warning, an unstoppable force of pure devastation. If only he and Hannah had fortified their defenses back then, their grim fate might have shattered. They were the sole warriors capable of surviving that bloody massacre, Arudo realized. Hannah suddenly turned, trying to break his intense focus. Lost in dark thoughts, Arudo absent-mindedly mumbled an apology, pushing her bedroom door open. She giggled, noting how incredibly rare it was to catch him zoning out completely. Warm light flooded Hannah's pristine, elegantly organized chamber. Taking in the immaculate decor, Arudo realized he had never stepped inside her sacred personal sanctuary before. In his tragic past life, he never crossed the parlor. He blankly wondered if this beautiful space had always been hers. Hannah brightly confirmed it was her actual bedroom, leaving Arudo slightly stunned. She gently explained that aristocratic traditions allowed welcoming cherished friends into private quarters, and she desperately wanted to thank him properly. Hannah faced him, her eyes overflowing with sincere gratitude. Arudo quickly deflected, insisting her spectacular growth was entirely her own triumph. He merely guided her. Blushing fiercely, she giggled, expecting his humble deflection. She nervously started asking if they could take things further, but Arudo internally panicked, cutting her off. A horrifying realization struck him like lightning. In his forgotten past, she had also offered her heart and deeply confessed her romantic feelings. He absolutely could not accept that now. Accepting her pure love meant swearing his life away, blinding them with dreams of happiness, only to summon death once more. For her absolute safety, he must break her heart. Her cheeks burning red, Hannah simply asked him to be her closest friend. Arudo froze, completely, utterly blindsided by this innocent request. The flustered noblewoman stood there trembling, anxiously awaiting his final verdict. His face turning crimson, Arudo viciously cursed his own massive ego. How could he stupidly assume she wanted a romantic confession? What an idiot. Embarrassment washed over him in waves. Noticing his flushed expression, Hannah tenderly checked on him, gesturing toward a seat while gently offering her hand. Arudo warmly agreed, honored to be her trusted confidant. Beaming with radiant joy, Hannah thanked him profusely, her heart fluttering. She happily thought that while he wasn't her romantic partner yet, their blossoming connection needed absolutely zero rushing right now. The peaceful afternoon finally wrapped up. Hannah beamed at Arudo, deeply grateful for their unforgettable day together. Bowing apologetically for his long stay, his eyes locked onto an ancient blade resting behind a crystal case. Drawn to the weapon, he was struck speechless. Noticing his absolute fascination, Hannah softly revealed its mythical origin. That is forged from legendary Orichallan. A divine relic, she continued, crafted specifically for our founding patriarch right after the cataclysmic War of the Gods. Gazing at the legendary metal, Arudo felt a profound realization. Its overwhelming aura washed over him completely. She confessed it was the ultimate carnal treasure. Yet shockingly, not a single soul could lift it. Baffled, Arudo analyzed the sleek blade. It hardly looked massive enough to demand such impossible strength. It possesses a profound will, she murmured. A dormant, sacred power meant solely to defend the world's most precious values. Tragically, the blade sealed itself forever the moment our ancestor helped establish this very kingdom. Staring intently at the relic, Arudo silently theorized the truth. You simply cannot champion absolute global justice while bound to a single nation's greed. Shaking off the heavy atmosphere, Hannah shot him a hopeful glance, begging him to stay for evening supper. Though deeply touched, Arudo politely backed away. A humble commoner like myself has no place lingering here tonight, he insisted gently. Accepting his humble excuse, she watched him bow. He promised they would reunite at the academy bright and early tomorrow. Flashing a brilliant smile, he swore their newfound friendship would remain an unbreakable bond for all eternity. But stepping into the shadows, a crushing dread suffocated him. That promise tomorrow was nothing but a fragile illusion. He prayed she would cherish his memory, no matter what tragedy unfolded next. She stood silently, watching his silhouette fade. The nightmare was ticking down. Hannah's fated execution was merely 7 hours away. Returning home, his loyal slime bounced forward happily. Calling out his return, he checked if the goblins had traded their mana crystals. Instantly, the gelatinous pet spat out a mountain of gold. Inspecting the ridiculous fortune, Arudo's expression hardened. Make sure the squad delivers this wealth directly to Hannah, he commanded. The little creature wobbled in shock, seemingly confused by this sudden, incredibly grave directive. Stay over with lion or magic tonight, Rue, Arudo whispered softly. I have a deadly score to settle alone. Give them my best regards. Rue nudged him anxiously, silently protesting the separation. As the familiar weight rested on his shoulder, guilt pierced Arudo's heart over neglecting his tiny companion. Smiling warmly, he hugged the little monster tightly. Later, with Ru deep in slumber and midnight suffocating the city, Arudo stared into the abyss outside. The trap was set. Sumigan would inevitably march down this very street, heading straight for the carnal estate. This vantage point was perfect for an ambush. Taking a deep breath, he materialized his glowing status window, bracing himself. Outgnawed at his sanity. Could these meager stats actually slay a monster like Sumigan, or would history viciously repeat itself? His past incarnation had never known such pathetic frailty, but hesitation meant death. He forcefully crushed his swirling anxieties. It sacrificed his very soul to reach this timeline. The only option left was absolute, unyielding warfare. He would slaughter Sumigan, whatever the cost. This was a bloody requiem for his entirely destroyed past. That fateful afternoon, a sinister pall choked the entire capital. No one knew if it was apocalyptic hellfire or a demonic invasion. Perched on a high roof, Arudo witnessed a terrifying inferno near the palace. The carnal manor was burning. An absolute, merciless massacre. Sprinting toward the roaring flames, his mind spiraled into absolute chaos. What kind of madness had descended here? Only Hannah's survival mattered. Bursting into the courtyard, he locked eyes on an imposing threat. The bleeding butler desperately shielded the family. Menacing figure sneered coldly, claiming the absolute truth had finally been revealed. Condensing a terrifying orb of lethal mana, the assassin proclaimed, "By the absolute decree of our sovereign, Hannah Carnal breathes her final breath tonight." Spitting blood, the butler screamed in disbelief. How can this be happening? Why would Sumigan Salwi, one of Euphonia's legendary 12 generals, stoop to assassination? The Dark Warrior scoffed arrogantly. "We 12 generals are the very embodiment of the state. We are the blade that purges traitors for the Empire's glory. This is an imperial mandate. My actions are absolute, unquestionable law." He glared down at the wounded man. A pathetic servant like you should have known better than to defy executioners. Paralyzed by the tyrannical ruling, the loyal protector could only listen as the weeping duchess begged for her innocent child's life. Looking back at his terrified young miss, the butler roared with righteous fury. What twisted justice demands the slaughter of a 15-year-old girl? As the shield of this family, I will tear you apart, Sumigan. I care nothing for your rank among the 12. Screaming in defiance, the servant lunged forward. But the monstrous general swatted him away with a mere flick of his finger. Sumigan sighed in sheer boredom. He had genuinely hoped the legendary Carnal Guardian might actually provide a brief moment of entertainment, but this pathetic display was severely underwhelming. Conjuring devastating hellfire, the general mercilessly sealed the butler's agonizing doom. Witnessing this absolute nightmare, Hannah screamed Klein's name, reaching out in pure devastation. Arudo watched the massacre unfold. Sumigan coldly dismissed the bloodshed, confessing that ending the butler's life brought him absolutely no emotion. Twisted Mage mused that higher stakes might finally cure his crushing apathy. He turned his piercing gaze toward the women, terrified. Hannah looked at her mother, who desperately promised to protect her no matter what. Embracing her child fiercely, she whispered her final vow of deep, unconditional love. Shielding her daughter, the Duchess bravely stepped forward, ordering the monster to back away. She accused him of plotting to annihilate their noble house. Sumigan smirked. He revealed that from this moment onward, the Duke's main bloodline was completely safe. He declared his initial mission was total annihilation, but the Duke had cowardly submitted to the King's ultimate decree. To survive, Hannah's own father had abandoned her. Hearing this sickening betrayal, her mother wailed in utter despair. Hannah's world shattered entirely as her father's ruthless betrayal finally sank in. Sumigan mocked that the Duke valued his status over his own flesh and blood. Sneering, the mage reminded the Duchess of her meaningless title. With a brutal strike, he impaled the mother, mocking the Duke's pathetic sacrifice for a doomed family name. Traumatized, Hannah collapsed in devastating tears beside her mother's lifeless, bleeding body. Sumigan smiled at her shattered expression. He wondered if she shared his twisted belief in heaven's absolute design. Above all else, the psychopath hungered to uncover if human souls were actually real. He asked if she ever felt humanity lacked free will, acting as mere magical puppets trapped within a divine, grand illusion orchestrated by God. He confessed that his endless, gruesome experiments had yielded zero answers so far. He demanded to know if she was real. Weeping uncontrollably, Hannah desperately swore that she was a living human. Sumigan snapped, demanding who gave her permission to speak. He wanted her soul's answer. Hannah trembled, feeding his sadistic, twisted pleasure. Watching her break, the lunatic felt he was finally nearing a divine revelation. He summoned a storm of lethal wind blades. Thrilled by her pure terror, he declared this agonizing reaction absolutely flawless. Stepping from the shadows, Arudo furiously demanded her immediate release. Sumigan simply glanced at Arudo, instantly paralyzing the boy with his overwhelming aura. The villain chuckled at the perfect timing. He mocked the paralyzed boy's meaningless existence. Looming over Arudo, Sumijin coldly decreed that a peasant had zero right to draw breath. By foolishly interrupting his sacred magical research, this arrogant child had crossed a fatal line. The mage considered slaughtering him instantly, but realized killing someone outside his targeted noble hit list went against his strict orders. Turning around, the villain proposed a much darker game. A twisted spark of inspiration struck him. Arudo would become the ultimate witness. As the mage slowly tortured Lady Hannah to death, her agonizing screams, mixed with Arudo's crushing despair, would finally prove if human existence was a reality or an illusion. He praised his own sickening brilliance, firmly convinced of his unmatched, godlike genius. Desperate, Arudo strained his trembling hand toward Hannah. Sumijin laughed, noticing the boy lacked the strength to even scream. He mocked that this absolute paralysis was dictated by his low cosmic status, an unbreakable law woven by heaven itself. He warned the boy to accept his pathetic fate, cursed from birth with such a disgustingly short, meaningless lifespan. Trapped in silent agony, Arudo desperately prayed for mercy, but the merciless monster unleashed absolute destruction, slaughtering Hannah before his eyes. Utterly broken, hot tears cascaded down the powerless boy's face. The slaughter complete, the cold-blooded psychopath feigned pity, feeling absolutely zero remorse inside. Tossing Arudo away like trash, he left the boy drowning in agonizing guilt, entirely shattered by his own pathetic weakness. Days later, Hannah's battered corpse was quietly dumped beneath an old watermill, far beyond the city's weeping borders. A forged suicide note painted a pathetic lie, claiming she ended her life to spare her noble family from disgrace. Despite the glaringly fake handwriting, the corrupt authorities officially ruled her brutal murder as a tragic, self-inflicted end. Now, staring through the window, Arudo gripped his fists. With just one single hour before her fated murder, he swore bloody vengeance. Spotting that familiar hooded figure below, Arudo didn't hesitate. He launched himself directly at the approaching nightmare. The confused mage demanded his identity. Unflinching, our hero simply declared himself as Arudo, a mere peasant born with the lowest life status. As Sumijin blinked in shock, Arudo smirked. "You're the 12th general, Sumijin Sui, right?" The sinister mage chuckled coldly, warning that knowing his true identity meant this boy would never leave this alley alive. Arudo fired back, declaring he had arrived specifically to shatter this ridiculous charade. Scoffing at the insult, Sumijin countered that his actions were bound by absolute royal decree. If the boy chose to stand in his path, death was the only option. Suddenly, a suffocating paralysis seized Arudo. Sumijin had activated submission, completely freezing his opponent. The Grand Sorcerer mercilessly struck the boy with his staff, snarling, "Know your place. You are meddling with forces beyond your comprehension." Yet, Arudo simply glared back. His fierce, unyielding gaze left the seasoned mage profoundly unsettled and entirely baffled. Realizing intimidation was failing, the commander demanded the stubborn youth surrender immediately. Hurling the boy against cold stone, Sumijin wiped his sweating forehead, genuinely disturbed by his own sudden surge of raging fury. The unyielding defiance of a mere child baffled him. One tiny pebble was threatening to derail an entire avalanche. In a heartbeat, the boy materialized, tightly gripping his fabled dragon bone blade. Caught completely off guard, the mage watched in sheer disbelief as the boy's status window flickered. His life force had just shattered its limits, evolving from stage 1 to stage 2. Shock rippled through the supreme sorcerer. How could a supposedly pathetic, low-tier weakling even attempt to launch a strike against his overwhelming might? What sorcery was unfolding here? Memories of his brutal 7-day magical training flooded his mind. He had forcefully evolved his core, knowing the true nightmare would be devastating control spells like submission. However, relying on past battle experience, he knew absolute immunity would rapidly forge itself. Right on cue, the paralyzing seal shattered entirely. A fierce smirk crossed his face. The trap was perfectly set. Rewriting one's very destiny was supposed to be a myth. Yet, he had actively shattered his own fundamental limits, defying the absolute laws of reality. This is the terrifying potential of my creation gift, he silently realized. A newfound, overwhelming aura radiated from the boy. Hovering above, the perplexed commander frantically tried to decipher this bizarre anomaly. Clinging to pride, the Grand Mage coldly declared this pathetic rebellion would change absolutely nothing. The youth fiercely snapped back that destiny was not his to dictate. Mocking this unshakable resolve, the Dark Wizard laughed bitterly. "Do you truly believe a worthless insect can shatter heaven's power?" Evading with phantom-like speed, the boy reveled in his newfound agility. His magical reserves were overflowing like a raging tempest. Surging with boundless energy, he faced his oppressor. "I might be a lowly commoner, but I will annihilate anyone who threatens my cherished ones." Without hesitation, he unleashed a devastating magical storm. First came the blinding fury of a concentrated blazing inferno, followed closely by the bone-chilling absolute zero frost, a violently spiraling tempest of wind, and a crushing torrential water blast. Witnessing this overwhelming elemental fury, terror struck the commander. The impossible was happening. This child was dual-casting multiple supreme-tier disasters. Casual combat was no longer an option here. Absolute annihilation was required. The seasoned veteran finally understood that this duel had just escalated into a full-blown war. Channeling malice, the wizard fired a lethal wave of abyssal ash. The youth instantly countered with his combined elemental fury. Watching the collision, reality struck hard. His 4 ultimate attacks barely canceled out one casual strike, proving why this monster was crowned the realm's absolute strongest sorcerer. Yet, the terrifying gap in their power wasn't an unbridgeable abyss. A fiery spark of hope ignited. A desperate path to victory had finally revealed itself. Acting on instinct, he detonated aquatic spheres, instantly engulfing the battlefield in blinding fog. The veteran instantly decoded this desperate trick to blind his supreme combat senses. Bursting through the mist, the boy unleashed a blade flurry. Yet, his opponent elegantly deflected every lethal slash. Brushing off the assault like a pesky insect, the commander sneered, boasting that toppling one of Euphonia's 12 generals required true power. Panic flickered within as his perfectly calculated blade strikes continuously met empty air. Realizing this monster possessed ungodly physical speed alongside divine magical talent, gritting his teeth, the determined hero shifted his stance for one final, devastating charge. Viewing the boy as a mere pest, the dark wizard manifested an invisible, hypersensitive web of lethal energy. This absolute domain tracked the faintest heartbeat or magical ripple. Smirking, he dared his prey to enter. One wrong step meant instant annihilation. As the heroic youth lunged forward, the confident sorcerer braced for a direct, foolish collision. Terror gripped his heart. The absolute detection web remained silent. His agile prey had completely shifted course. Sensing zero magical energy, the panicked wizard wondered, what crazy stunt is this? A split second later, a devastating blow connected from the blind spot. As the wizard crumpled in utter disbelief, the victor coldly announced checkmate. Bizarrely, the defeated wizard chuckled, praising a mysterious lord. Glancing upward, sheer dread paralyzed the hero. A massive steel street lamp was plummeting directly toward his skull. Naruto narrowly evaded the fatal strike, prompting the sorcerer to sneer that gratitude was pointless. Still, the spellcaster glared at him, barking, "What vile trickery repelled my ultimate technique? I sense 0 mana activation. You dared to turn my own power against me?" Naruto smirked inwardly. This cheat skill was prepared exclusively for this duel. By blanketing the arena in blinding vapor, he successfully trapped his target perfectly. Just one final phase remained, and every movement was perfectly calculated. Had a supreme deity actually stepped in, Naruto would have been obliterated instantly. While our protagonist analyzed the situation, his silent defiance signaled the arrogant sorcerer to drop the completely useless interrogation altogether. Invoking the divine oracle of Formus, the caster commanded the immediate eradication of the hero's awakening seed. Yet, this unexpected barrier hinted at deeper secrets. Hearing those words, our protagonist questioned how this villain recognized such talent. He needed absolute answers, deciding to interrogate the mage directly. Praising those lightning-fast reflexes, the villain smirked. "Do you comprehend the hero's potential?" he taunted, describing a mythical blessing born once a century. According to ancient lore, this catastrophic power awakens solely before global slaughter. Though glorified by fools, it is a devastating curse. Its mere existence breeds pure chaos across realms. Therefore, the heavens purge these anomalies before birth. Being a devoted servant, the villain's words made Naruto realize his previous miscalculations. The malicious caster stepped forward, eagerly explaining the grim reality. Staring him down, our protagonist proposed a completely inverted theory, instantly shattering the villain's confident composure. He boldly declared that heroes never bring destruction. Instead, the world's overflowing corruption forcefully births a hero to save it. The sorcerer fiercely demanded absolute proof. Though lacking hard evidence, the young warrior smirked, insisting his logic held infinitely more truth. Chuckling darkly, the caster respected his rebellious spirit, but spat that baseless theories meant nothing. Roaring that playtime was over, he unleashed a fierce assault, demanding immediate submission. Lethal spells closed in instantly. Yet, even at point-blank range, the villain was horrified to see absolutely zero fear. Not a single flinch of agony crossed his expression. Enraged by this eerie calm, the mad spellcaster screamed for blood. Could this boy truly be unkillable? They clashed. Embracing the threat of divine punishment, the protagonist resolved to fight until the end, skillfully weaving through explosive magical bombardments. Suddenly, the very air pressure plummeted. Before the villain could blink, a devastating fist smashed directly into his jaw, shattering his defenses. Relentless barrage of merciless strikes followed. "Your time is up," he declared. The bleeding wizard was completely paralyzed by absolute shock. His opponent's aura had mutated into something unfathomably terrifying. Had this monster been holding back entirely? Slammed brutally into the dirt, the sorcerer suddenly felt a crushing gravity upon him. What was this crushing pressure? A gravity hex? Wasn't that legendary art erased during the ancient celestial wars? Even holding the title of Supreme Mage, he was utterly powerless against this overwhelming invisible force. How had this trap been laid? The shocking truth struck him. The boy silently chanted defensive seals while playing victim. Humiliated beyond reason, the bloodied caster bellowed for his absolute erasure. He would carve this disrespect forever. A catastrophic surge of mana swirled into the enemy's staff. Watching closely, our hero instantly recognized the apocalyptic danger. Violent energy fractured the air itself. It was obvious the fragile weapon was screaming, unable to contain such godlike power. No ordinary relic could shoulder that burden unless a celestial crystal was embedded. Laughing maniacally, the villain screamed revelations were useless now. This divine weapon is forged from skeletal remains of ancient monarchs and orichalcum. It is the pinnacle of imperial engineering, powered by a synthetically forged terror of the heavens. Unleashing it would utterly vaporize the region. He knew firing this meant losing his prestigious general rank, but rage demanded absolute devastation. He would ensure not a single speck of dust remained of the brat. Levitating like a wrathful god, the maniac commanded his glowing artifact to rain down an inescapable storm of pure, unadulterated death. Activating the fabled mourner relic, skies darkened. The protagonist realized dodging was mathematically impossible. Retreating to the very edge, he fortified his core. Touching down, the exhausted caster finally acknowledged his supreme tier strength. Yet, this supposed peasant treated combat like a warm-up, forcing the elite commander to burn everything. He cursed himself for not slaughtering that bloodline earlier. Relying on rumors of their veteran butler, he foolishly hoarded his mana. Regardless of his depleted state, he had to push forward, violently carving through the avalanches. The enemy's eyes widened in sheer terror. Arudo stood tall through the smoke, defying all logic of death. Staring down the bleeding sorcerer, Arudo felt a chill crawl up his spine. The Grim Reaper had nearly claimed his soul. He had triggered his ultimate override. Enduring the devastating blast, he forcefully tore open a spatial rift to escape. Even dodging the main impact, that violent shockwave nearly crushed his bones. Had that monstrous spell struck at peak magical output, his existence would have been erased completely. The panicked caster screamed at him to stay back. Desperation drove him to hurl a jagged rock at our hero. Swaying on battered legs, absolute certainty burned within him. Next to the agony of losing Hana, these strikes were pathetic. Closing the distance, Arudo branded his foe a coward. To shield his loved ones, he would obliterate destiny itself. The general was thrown violently, collapsing lifelessly at the conqueror's blood-stained boots. Drawing his trembling blade, Arudo aimed for the kill. Hesitation meant leaving Hana vulnerable to this monster once more. The perfect window had opened. His previous counterattack had dealt catastrophic damage. Those tricks wouldn't save him twice. A fatal blow was necessary, but his hands froze. Suddenly, Lion vaulted down from the rooftops. "Master, what is this madness?" Lion gasped, utterly shocked. Arudo recognized his ally. Rushing forward to demand answers, Lion clumsily tripped and fell hard. Sighing, Arudo finally lowered his weapon. Finding the unconscious threat, Lion felt the heavy aura lingering in the air, yet quickly comforted his battered leader. "The wretched Sumijan is ours." Lion boasted about his supposed glory, but Arudo humbly confessed he hadn't achieved a true, overpowering victory. Targeting Hana, a mere budding hero? Absolute garbage, Lion spat, arguing that executing this villain felt morally impossible anyway. The protagonist silently agreed. Besides, his violently shaking hands could never execute that final, lethal strike. Stepping closer, his comrade offered comfort. Sparing a human soul always brought natural hesitation. Slaughtering monsters was easy, but men were different. Sumijan wrought absolute chaos, but the higher authorities would execute justice soon enough. He praised the heavens for his master's safety. Arudo smiled warmly in return. Hauling his leader up, Lion expressed sheer disbelief. Toppling one of Euphonia's 12 legendary generals, that cemented him as an absolute god among warriors. Our hero humbly brushed off the praise. He claimed this triumph stemmed purely from exploiting the general's careless blind spots. An unexpected ambush had secured the win. The battlefield terrain heavily favored the young swordsman's unorthodox fighting style. Without those lucky variables aligning perfectly, his body would have been completely ripped apart. The true secret to his survival? His recently upgraded living conditions had passively amplified his hidden stats to insane new heights. Chilling thought crossed his mind. Lacking even a single level, he would be a corpse right now. Noticing his master's pale expression and heavy silence, Lion nervously checked his vitals. Shaking away the darkness, he assured his subordinate. Then, he questioned why the powerful Magika had mysteriously vanished from Lion's side. His loyal follower revealed her sudden departure. She abandoned the inn completely unseen. Frowning, the hero demanded her current location. Her path remained a complete mystery to everyone. Masking his own worry, our hero confidently stated she could handle herself. Without warning, he violently shoved his ally backwards. A terrifying, murderous intent had just sliced through the space between them. His exhausted body screamed in agony. Emerging from the dust stood Citri. She flashed a sinister smile, welcoming them to an unexpected, deadly reunion. Lion blinked in extreme confusion at the mysterious newcomer. Offended by their blank stares, the arrogant girl scoffed loudly. "I am Citri Justice," she announced proudly. "The dragon's benefactor and another of Euphonia's 12 elite generals. An absolute judge for the Council of Truth and Lies. Is your skull empty, or are you just playing dumb?" Staring blankly at her bizarre, spiral-shaped twin tails, Lion silently deduced this eccentric woman practically screamed pure villainy. Marching forward, she mocked the hero's terrible fashion sense and inability to respect her majestic hair. He fired back with heavy sarcasm about her completely delusional vanity. Disgusted by their insolence, she violently snapped her attention back to the main target. Her patience had completely evaporated. Bantering with worthless peasants was beneath her dignity. Thrusting an accusatory finger forward, she locked her deadly gaze directly onto him. She branded him as absolute scum. The young warrior froze in pure shock. Absolute garbage. His loyal follower fiercely yelled back. Sumijam was the true monster who decimated this territory. His master was completely, undeniably innocent. The arrogant judge merely smirked, fully aware of those facts. The corrupted general was already stripped of his prestigious rank and faced incoming punishment, but he was utterly irrelevant right now. Her divine mandate was terrifyingly simple. Exterminate anyone deemed a wicked sinner by the heavens. Raising her hand with absolute authority, she pronounced her chilling verdict. "By the council's decree, your pathetic life ends here." The enemy burst forward, her lethal blade aimed at Arudo. Still dizzy, he sat defenseless, as certain death approached him once again. But the massive lion stood firm, drawing his mighty blade. He roared at the twisted enforcer, demanding if justice meant slaughtering the innocent. Vowing to protect his lord, he sent the villain flying backward. Her devastating strike was completely parried. She smirked, admitting she thought he was a brainless brute, but his martial prowess was incredibly lethal. Lion scoffed in defiance, mocking her fragile weapon. He boldly declared that he alone would shatter her arrogance without his master's help. Yet from behind, Arudo screamed a desperate warning. She revealed her eerie blade held dark secrets, begging his warrior to trust him. But Lion recklessly charged the menacing villain with unyielding fury. The frantic warning came too late. As the assassin's blade slashed him, absolute dread washed over Arudo. With a wicked sneer, she declared his raw power useless, brutally tearing his flesh. The unyielding titan stood paralyzed. With his legendary physical resistance maxed out, a pathetic scratch shouldn't hurt. Suddenly, hellish agony erupted as crimson poured from his shredded hand. Arudo gasped in horror while the hulking warrior fell to his knees. Sprinting forward with his heart pounding, the terrified master desperately checked his bleeding comrade. Total confusion gripped him. How could an invincible tank with absolute damage immunity be sliced open? Glaring at the smiling assassin, the horrifying truth hit Arudo. She had unleashed a supernatural skill. He realized her blade was a cursed artifact, a divine weapon forged from absolute twisted law. Compared to the 12 elite generals, her base combat stats were pathetic. Lion clearly possessed significantly greater raw physical force. The bleeding giant stared at his mangled flesh in pure disbelief. Arudo grimly revealed their hopeless reality. That demonic blade automatically cursed anyone stronger than its wielder. Knowing she was drastically outmatched, the cunning villain purposely struck him to trigger dark magic. This instantly shattered his legendary defenses, leaving him critically injured. The frantic protagonist warned that one-shotting this monster was impossible. Even grazing a single strand of her hair would trigger catastrophic backlash. Using excessive lethal force would instantly wipe out their own health bars. The higher their combat levels climbed, the harder survival would become. This broken artifact was how she dominated the 12 generals. Hearing this terrifying cheat skill, the giant felt completely cheated. He angrily demanded his strategy to crush her. Meanwhile, the sinister enforcer detected a massive anomaly in his impossible insight. A chilling smile crept up as she interrogated his past. Stepping closer, she demanded to know how he uncovered her deepest secrets. The villainess mockingly guessed they must have clashed in a past life. He coldly brushed off her taunts, declaring that if she was just buying time to regenerate, he would cut her down. Boom! A massive explosion shattered the battlefield, freezing everyone. Arudo realized the blast came from his ally's home. Panic spiked in his chest. Was another terrifying enemy launching a surprise raid? He desperately ordered his injured comrade to sprint. Suddenly, a blinding light pierced the sky, revealing an aura dwarfing even the strongest generals. Knowing his companion was in mortal peril, they dashed forward, relentlessly pursued. She laughed maniacally, mocking his pathetic escape attempt. Yet internally, the assassin was utterly baffled by that heaven-shaking noise. Was a divine miracle unfolding? She coldly analyzed her prey, noting his desperate hesitation as crushing guilt tormented his wavering soul. Convinced the cowardly hero was simply abandoning the fight, she gripped her cursed blade, lunging forward for a brutal execution. Trapped in regret, Aruto cursed his weakness. Despite conquering legends, he was still failing to save her. But out of nowhere, his little slime companion leaped directly into the path of destruction. The master frantically caught his tiny friend, utterly stunned. He initially thought it was a playful prank as the gelatinous body melted. Tears blurred his vision as he begged his loyal pet to stay awake. He screamed out their precious memories, refusing to let go. Suddenly, the magical creature completely dissolved, leaving behind a single lifeless orb. Blazing with uncontrollable fury, he drew his weapon to butcher his pet's murderer. But suddenly, the world shattered, hurling him back into a familiar abyss. A mysterious deity lounging on a throne scoffed at the hero's ignorance regarding the curse. With a chilling smile, it welcomed him back. This was the absolute being who engineered his endless cycle of reincarnation. The godly figure mocked his useless, childish tantrum. It smirked, questioning if the mortal truly understood the weapon's terrifying power. Looking around the endless darkness, crushing despair hit the protagonist. This was the exact same purgatory. The horrible realization clicked he had just been killed again. A spectral chair materialized behind him. Take a seat. The Supreme Being announced their time to talk had arrived. Aruto demanded if he was dead, but the cosmic entity coldly denied it. His spirit had merely shattered its mortal limits. Rebirth was completely possible, yet this current vessel must be abandoned forever. However, his core essence would remain perfectly intact. The cosmic being observed that Aruto was enduring an unimaginably brutal existence this time around. Devastated by the tragic loss of Ru, his spirit nearly suffered absolute erasure. Yet, the stubborn warrior firmly insisted he was already dead. He fiercely demanded an immediate return to reality, but the towering entity paused, declaring it had one crucial question first. What was his true purpose for going back? Without hesitation, Aruto swore he would mercilessly slaughter Citri the very second he arrived. He demanded absolute vengeance. Suddenly, a chaotic dimensional rift tore open directly beneath the hero's feet. The being coldly stated that returning to that specific reality was strictly forbidden. Utterly baffled, Aruto demanded a reason, considering that monster had just murdered his closest comrade. The cosmic entity questioned his ultimate goal, reminding the young warrior of his desperate plea right before his previous departure. Hearing this, Aruto vividly remembered its terrifyingly twisted smile. Sensing his shifting memories, the being confirmed their mutual ambitions. They absolutely refused to let his soul vanish before his grand destiny was achieved. It urged the furious hero to cool his raging anger, repeating the ultimate test. What was his true goal upon returning to the living? Aruto felt blinding wrath consuming him, yet he knew that yielding to blind vengeance would only cause the tragic deaths of more precious friends. He had embraced this grueling second chance solely to rescue Hana. Aruto passionately declared his ultimate resolve, and the cosmic being acknowledged it. By wagering his entire existence, he intended to protect his most cherished person. Because of this noble conviction, they propelled him toward absolute triumph. Aruto boldly swore to continue their deadly gamble, claiming another reset was entirely impossible until his spirit was permanently burned away to ashes. His lethal steel stopped a hair's breadth from Citri's widening eyes. She glared at the warrior, desperately pleading for time while branding him a wicked sinner. Aruto calculated that his legendary blade dealt devastating damage to truly formidable enemies. Yet, it harbored a sinister skill meant to completely break weak foes, even though unleashing it would inflict a devastating curse upon its master. He quickly deduced that Citri must have sustained massive internal injuries while ruthlessly attacking his partner. With unyielding, icy eyes, he coldly stated that his time for her was over. The villainess recoiled in sheer shock at his ruthless dismissal. Glancing back, he ordered Lion to carry his fallen comrade to safety. Shocked, the ally demanded to know if Aruto planned to march forward entirely alone, insisting on fighting alongside him. Meeting his loyal friend's gaze, the protagonist softly confessed he could not bear seeing Ru endure any more pain. His master plan was a joyous reunion after securing Hana. Until that triumphant moment arrived, Aruto claimed full responsibility for bearing the burden alone to protect them. Reluctantly agreeing, his loyal friend demanded that the hero must save Hana and survive. Smiling confidently, Aruto swore to survive. As the hero dashed away, Lion glared at Citri, coldly mocking her for not running when she had the chance. The bewildered villainess completely missed his terrifying implication. Lion taunted her, stating that such staggering ignorance was truly pathetic for one of the 12 elite generals. He grimly observed that this decaying kingdom was rapidly approaching absolute ruin. While he spoke, mysterious figures plummeted from the heavens. Elsewhere, Magika sprinted desperately, sensing her master's fierce combat aura exploding in the distance. Sensing his explosive magical pressure, she quickly deduced that he was currently battling Sumijin. Knowing she had to provide backup, an incredibly sinister aura suddenly blanketed the distant estate. He questioned if the dark deity Foremus was responsible. The divine seed had miraculously awakened within Hana earlier that very same day. The mage realized heavenly powers were moving before the heroic seed fully blossomed. Yet, She doubted an immediate emergency evacuation for the young girl was required. Suddenly, a catastrophic force crashed down from above, instantly obliterating the entire mansion. Divine shadows had arrived, placing Hannah in mortal peril. Bursting into the blazing ruins, the horrified mage watched these celestial nightmares mercilessly butcher the innocent residents. Realizing instantly that the parents and loyal butler were brutally slaughtered, swearing to protect the divine vessel, the mage violently clashed with the beasts. Suddenly, a terrifying, blood-curdling shriek from the upper floor pierced the chaos. Facing a terrifying wall of dark entities, she unleashed a devastating attack to obliterate the blockade, desperately forcing her bloody way toward the helpless girl. A divine nightmare appeared, launching a lethal blade straight at the child. The frantic mage screamed for her to hold on. Her blazing weapon instantly annihilated the dark entity, returning swiftly. Trembling, the sorceress broke the devastating news that her entire family and staff had perished. Hugging the weeping child, she cursed her tardiness while promising absolute safety. Through her heartbreaking tears, the mage swore absolute protection. She promised these cosmic nightmares would never touch her. Suddenly, Aruto burst into the ruined estate, his heart sinking in pure despair. Despite conquering Sumijin, this cruel destiny was repeating exactly as before. If true, Hannah is gone, Aruto's heart sank. But suddenly, Magika's voice pierced the despair. The girl stood perfectly safe behind her. A massive wave of relief washed over him. Breathing heavily, he desperately checked if either of them had taken damage. Magika instantly silenced him. There was zero time for questions. She demanded his absolute focus on the threat. Those divine shadows in the sky were merely a prelude. A far more terrifying force was awakening, and time was up. Just then, a monstrous figure plummeted from the heavens. Assuming it was a standard fiend, Aruto froze as the horrifying reality of this new enemy finally registered. The familiar demonic aura he knew so well was now radiating with an absolutely overwhelming, suffocating intensity. Unlike naturally born fiends, this nightmare was deliberately forged by the heavens. It was a holy demon of absolute destruction. Wasting no time, Aruto rapidly deactivated the system override he had maintained since his brutal clash against Sumijin. Releasing it meant sacrificing magical power. However, armed with his newly awakened resistance, he was fully prepared to join the fray. He ordered Hannah to stay firmly planted. Unsheathing his lethal blade, he was finally ready to unleash his true combat prowess. In a blinding flash, the holy beast lunged at him. Its terrifying velocity completely defied logic. He met the strike with his weapon, only for the blade to explode into pieces. That dagger was supposed to be unbreakable. Impossible! How did it shatter? He gasped, narrowly dodging her devastating, relentless strikes. Magika boldly intercepted the fiend, buying him a crucial second. She strictly commanded him to focus, admitting even her eyes could barely track this monster. Her massive equipped artifact clearly designated her as a devastating heavy combatant. Yet, her beastly agility matched Magika perfectly. This terrifying squirrel tribe warrior was a true divine masterpiece of destruction. Sensing the overwhelming danger, Aruto formulated a split formation. He shouted for Magika to charge the front line while he provided critical backup. Catching his drift, she instantly blasted forward. Relying on her own lightning-fast reflexes, she engaged the divine beast in brutal close quarters. While the two powerhouses collided, Aruto found his perfect opening. He immediately fired a blinding micro-flash technique at the enemy. Perfectly syncing with his strike, Magika ramped up her relentless offensive assault. Aruto expertly manipulated the piercing light beams, tracing Magika's fluid dodges to trap their deadly opponent. Exploiting a fatal blind spot, Aruto landed a vicious, calculated strike right into the creature's spine. The fiend flinched. It was light damage, but it connected perfectly. Suddenly, the enemy's angelic wings erupted with blinding radiance, leaving him utterly stunned. Without warning, she unleashed an absolutely devastating storm of razor-sharp feathers directly at his position. The overwhelming barrage made dodging totally impossible. Deadly glowing quills brutally shredded into his flesh from every conceivable angle. He desperately tried to trigger his system override, but in that life-or-death second, his crucial ability completely misfired. A lethal quill impaled his chest. The sheer impact launched him backward, violently smashing into a nearby structure. Magika shrieked his name in pure terror, but Aruto remained entirely motionless on the shattered ground.